Welcome, everyone. The event is now live. John, please take it away.
Thanks, Paula. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Remote Workforce Summit. Today's event was organized by the hardworking folks at Redmond Magazine and Virtualization and Cloud Review, who have brought together some of the best independent experts on today's topic. And many thanks to our sponsors, Call Tower, Okta, Smart Deploy, and Red Hat for making this event possible. And thanks to you for joining us. I'm John K. Waters, Editor-in-Chief of Application Development Trends, and I'll be your moderator for the first of 3 information-packed sessions. But before we get started, I need to go over a few housekeeping details. Each of today's sessions is being recorded for later access. Keep an eye out for an email with a link to that recording. It'll be coming your way within the next few days. Each of today's sessions will be followed by a 5 to 10 minute Q&A. You can type your questions into the Q&A box at any time. Please feel free to add your questions as they occur to you. Throughout the summit, we'll do our best to get to all of them. Our sponsors have provided some extra resources that can be found on the right-hand side of your screen. Please take a moment to check those out. And last but not least, at the end of the 3rd session, one lucky attendee will be receiving a Surface Pro 8, the latest edition of Microsoft's ultralight tablet featuring a laptop-class Intel processor, all-day battery, and HD cameras. But you must be present to win, so stick with us. Now let's get started with our first session, Understanding the Remote Workforce. For this session, we've called on technologist, content creator, and senior resultant, Howard M. Cohen. In his 35-plus years in the IT industry, Mr. Cohen has held senior executive positions in many of the top channel partner organizations, and he currently writes for and about the IT channel. He is a sought-after speaker, an insightful observer of the technology landscape, and he's one of our favorite presenters. You're in for a great session. Take it away, Howard.
Thank you, John. You know, it's so interesting to me how a guy who so lacks in enthusiasm is hosting a program like this. It's like, my God. Thank you for the thank you for that enthusiastic welcome. I appreciate it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Understanding the New Remote Workforce. I have to tell you that I was very excited when I was asked to give this presentation, because it represents an unusual opportunity to focus on that segment of computing that we so rarely seem to focus on, the people who are actually using the computers. And this is a great opportunity to do that. Before I start talking about the remote workforce, I want to do something that I don't usually do, which is to share a statistic. 61%. Okay, that's done. So no, 61% of all employers say that COVID-19 has not accelerated their company's digital transformation. Not. You know what? I say hogwash. That is nonsense. They are completely off base. And I'll tell you why. To me, and to many of the sources that I turn to, digital transformation is not about installing new technology or updating or upgrading technology. It's about more than that. It's not so much about the technology itself as it is about how we use it, how people use technology to improve things, to make their lives better, to make their work faster and easier to do and less error-prone, and to free them up so they can do things they really want to be doing, really interesting things, more satisfying work. That is the real definition of a digital transformation. And given that, if you agree with that, then you'll agree also that the global pandemic that we're still experiencing brought with it a global digital transformation. No doubt, definitely the biggest of all time. And it may remain such forever. This may have been the biggest digital transformation we've ever experienced. And what's amazing about it is that it was instantaneous. In a day, we sent millions of people around the world to go work from home with no preparation, no planning, nothing in advance. We just said, go home and work. Now, go home and work nobody's prepared for it. What do we do? Well, the fact of the matter is, in some respects, we were prepared. As a matter of fact, we started getting prepared long ago. Let me explain what I mean. This gentleman said, work has become an activity, not a place. So in other words, we get to work instead of going to work. And that's great. You may not know this gentleman. Some of you may remember him. He's Robert Frankenberg, who was the second chairman of Novell, replacing the founder of Novell, Ray Norda. For the youngest of you in the crowd, Novell used to compete with Microsoft for the most popular network operating system. Matter of fact, they owned the market many years ago, but were unseated. But what's most amazing about this is that Mr. Frankenberg said this, that work has become an activity, not a place, in 1994 at a meeting of the Massachusetts Software Council. 1994, 26 years before the pandemic ever happened. Now, during that time, there were some telecommuting initiatives here and there, but the fact is we never made that shift from work being a destination to work being an activity. And so people start to wonder, what took so long? I mean, it's so sensible. Why would we not have done it right away? Why would we have not taken Frankenberg's advice? And the answer is that most executives polled at that time agreed with farmers who say that the farmer's shadow is the best fertilizer. In other words, if the farmer can't cast his shadow on his fields, they won't grow. Now, it's kind of ridiculous to think that if a manager can't cast his shadow on his employees, they won't be productive. To that, I again say hogwash. That is nonsense. Okay? People can do work on their own. They can be self-starting, and they can also be monitored without having to be 2 feet away from their manager. You know, that was not a good reason, but it was the reason that most executives, most managers gave over all of that time. Okay, so since we've been preparing for 26 years, we got there very quickly. You know, in a day, literally in a day. Unfortunately, we brought with us some significant security problems that, you know, maybe we kind of anticipated, but we still need to continue to deal with because they're challenging. Number one, as soon as everybody went home, it was likely that they were accessing corporate computers, corporate networks or servers on their home computers. Not exactly equipped for the best in security, easily vulnerable. They were using residential internet, which again, not as well protected as could be, certainly not up to corporate standards. And it created an extremely expanded threat surface. For most security managers, the threat surface is the area around your network, physically, really. You can start to scan that area, and you can see problems coming. But now, every person's home became an extension of that threat surface. So if you had 100 people, you had 100 new patches of threat surface. If you had 1,000 new patches, 10,000 new patches, people had huge threat surfaces to worry about now. Completely different picture. I could do a presentation on this alone, and it could take hours, but we're not going to do that today. Perhaps some other time we'll get back to this. What we're here to talk about today is what's next. Where do we go from here? How do we best support our new remote workforce? So to answer that question, we really need to start by collecting some information. And I want to start by talking about what management learned during this time that everybody's been working from home. The first thing they learned is that their employees hate their commute. It was among the top reasons employees like remote work. They don't have to commute into and out of work. In rural areas, in the Midwest, not so terribly bad. In the big cities, it can be horrible. hours of slow moving and just frustration. So that was one thing. Because there was no commute, here's a side benefit. We basically took 600,000 cars off the road in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions we were creating. So it was a very healthy thing in that respect. You know, the world's most recent pandemic created some good, healthy side benefits. And if we can get rid of the virus and still keep those greenhouse gases at bay, more the better. They also found, and this is really where it gets interesting, for the managers especially, they found that most of their employees were starting work at about the time they would ordinarily head out on their commute. And they finished usually around the time they would ordinarily get home from work. And nobody asked them to do that. They just did it because it felt good, felt right, gave them the opportunity to get their work done, gave them more flexibility during the day if they wanted to do something while they were home. It worked out really, really, really well. Basically, the employers got more hours just for free. So much so that more than half of employees now say that they would go looking for a new job if they couldn't continue working from home. You know, when the pandemic is over to the point where people can go back to the office, 58% don't want to. And so they'll go find another employer who will let them. 44% of them say they know somebody who already quit. So when you talk about the big quit, it's happening. A lot of people are seeing it, and a lot of employers are frustrated and concerned by it. 24% of them are willing to take a pay cut or maybe lose some vacation time just to allow them to continue working from home. It's that attractive to them. Well, no surprise, this attraction has spread. You see this lovely manager executive we have here? She and her colleagues want to continue working from home too. 90% of senior executives want to continue working from home. So this is more popular than people may realize. It's something that we've discovered is really good in so many ways. What else have our management executives learned? They learned that businesses lose $600 billion a year in workplace distractions. Not at home, not because they're working at home, in the office. $600 billion lost every year to workplace distractions. They also found that remote workers are 35 to 40% more productive than people in the office. That's it. That's the telling stat all by itself. We can repeat it 1,000 different ways. When we surveyed employers, 94% of them said that productivity has either been the same or gone up. Now, productivity staying the same is good news, right? They felt that if I send my people home, they'll be less productive. They were wrong. They acknowledged they were wrong. The productivity stayed the same to 67% of them. 27% of them said no, it got higher, got better. 51% of workers report that they feel more productive working from home. They say 95% of them say their productivity has been higher or the same since working remotely. 60% reported being more productive than they ever expected to be through the pandemic. And somehow they figured out that their productivity at home was 7% higher than they even expected. I don't know how they measured that. I can't imagine how you assess that. Oh, I was 7% more productive. It's just, that's the stat, though. And 40% was reported they were more productive at home during the pandemic than they had been when in the office. Wherever you get it, the number is somewhere in the 40s. It's, everybody's opinion is they were more productive. Let's take a look at it now from the worker's perspective. What did the working at home employees found? First of all, they tell us they found that remote work leads to better mental health. Hasn't worked that way for me. No, but seriously, 70% of those surveyed said that they felt that their mental health had improved. 18% asked if if their employers could possibly invest more in promoting better mental health. They also benefited in their pocket because they're not eating lunch out anymore, and because they're only dry cleaning half their clothes. You know, the instructions for being on a video conference. It's business up top and leisure down. Anyway, they save $4,000 a year between eating at home and not dry cleaning their work clothes. As a matter of fact, if you look at the top benefits, number one, with a bullet, was not having a commute. 84% loved the idea that they didn't have to commute anymore. 75% cited the cost savings, with 38% saying they'd saved at least $5,000 in the year. 20% say they'd save more than $10,000 just working from home in the year. Not bad. What else did we find? The reasons that they were more productive at home are interesting too. There were fewer interruptions. More than two-thirds of them said that they had fewer interruptions at home than they had in the office. Now, that's the reverse of what I think most executives would have told you in 1994, 95, 96. They had more focused time to focus on their work. Again, almost two-thirds felt that way. More than two-thirds felt they had a quieter work environment at home. While the executives saying, oh, they have their kids, they have their pets, they have their spouses, didn't seem to work that way. Two-thirds of them said, no, it's quieter there. I like it there. And it's more comfortable there than it is in the office. The only one that wasn't rated at that two-thirds level, only half of them said that they were happy about avoiding office politics. I think the other 45% were scared to admit it. But yeah, I mean, who likes office politics? Here, they're not affected by it. They don't have to deal with it. They can just do their work, which is what most people seem to want to do, which is great. A little more of what we found. They found that they were saving, on average, 40 minutes not having a commute. Now, again, you have to take the Midwest and the suburbs and small towns and whatnot, and then figure in the big cities and whatnot, and it averages out to 40%. If you did that for New York, it would probably be 5 times that, which is not fun. During COVID, 70% of full-time workers were working from home. The other 30% are pretty much represented by people who had to work in plants or factories, and they couldn't work from home. And those people deserve a lot of praise because they stepped up. They took a lot of chances, and they really helped us continue to do what we do in this country. Now, going forward, 92% of them say they're going to continue working at home at least one day a week. 80% said it's going to be 3 days a week. So everybody expects to be working from home at least sometimes. Unfortunately, 20 to 25% of the companies are helping out with the cost of furniture. So if you're going to get a real comfortable chair, you're going to pay for it out of pocket. 81% of them are optimistic that their employers will agree with them and let them work from home at least sometimes. 59% said that they would be more likely to choose an employer who offered remote work. So for those of you who are having a hard time recruiting good people, more than half of them want to be able to work at home at least half the time, at least part of the time. So reconsider your position on that if you're firmly against it. You may be doing yourself a disservice. They report being 22% happier than workers who are always in an on-site office. I don't know how they come up with that. How do you measure how happy you are? Oh, let's see. I feel 15% happier. I love that. That's a great stat. But here's one that's, again, very telling. Of workers who work more than 40 hours, more than a full-time week, 43% more of them were working from home than in the office. The likelihood of people working additional hours is much greater at home than working in the office. And this is like that commute thing, adding more hours in the beginning and end of the day. People felt free to work when they felt they needed to work. And in many cases, it turned into more than 40 hours a week worth of work. There's a give and take between having some more freedom and flexibility in your life and giving back some extra productivity and work. That's terrific. Okay, so now let's find out what these remote workers want. What they want at least a hybrid remote office model, which 3/4 of them want to be able to work at home sometimes and work in the office. Basically, they want to work where it makes the most sense for them to be on any given day. And that is just tremendously logical. 12% of them only want to work in the office. They don't want to work from home at all. Now, how many do you think want to work from home full-time? 50%, 60%, 13%. About the same stat. As many want to work at home full-time as want to work in the office full-time. Basically, everybody wants that hybrid model. They want to be amongst their coworkers sometimes, and they want to have some, quiet time to actually get work done at other times. And again, it seems to make a lot of sense. Their bosses seem to agree. 3/4 of them feel that remote work has been a success for their company. So those people back in the 90s were kind of wrong. Today's executives disagree. They feel, this is working. And they're real happy about that. On the other hand, those of you who are in commercial real estate, take note that executives expect to need like a third less office space in the next 3 years than they ever have before. So there are some offsetting cost benefits to employers as well. Okay, so we've looked at the past, and we have found that it worked out really well. That everybody that went home to work, most of them really got a lot out of it. Their employers got a lot out of it. There was more productivity than less. That's terrific. Now, let's look forward. Right? We don't know when the pandemic's going to end. It promised to end a couple of times now, and then things happen. We won't talk about those things. But 44% of companies going forward won't allow remote work at all. They don't want anybody working remotely. They may have a hard time recruiting personnel going forward, given that 58% want remote work, at least part-time. But 44%, no remote work. However, 85% of managers see remote work as the new normal. This is how it's going to be from now on, 85%. So if the leaders are saying it's going to be, it's going to be. And it is. It looks like it's going to be the new normal. Everybody seems to have gotten a lot out of it. This is an interesting stat. 16% of companies aren't coming back to the office at all. That's it. They're done. They're working from home from now on. Now, you remember that Twitter, within days of us all going home back in March of 2020, Twitter announced that they're never coming back to their office. Everybody's working from home from now on. And a few dozen companies immediately thereafter announced the same thing. And I'm sure there have been more. I'm sure that 16% is only the tip of this iceberg. I think we're going to see a lot more companies get on this bandwagon and have their people working from home and not from an office. And I don't necessarily know that I think that's good or bad. There are some aspects of socialization that are nice, and we're going to have to find another way to get those. 40% of companies say they will have hybrid work. People working from home sometimes, people working in the office sometimes. They'll go back and forth. Bottom line, remote work is here to stay. No doubt about it. Okay, so if remote work is here to stay, then management really has to start thinking about what they need to do, what they need to pay attention to make remote work successful. Okay, let's go through some of those. First one is no direct face-to-face management. This is that farmer's shadow thing. Okay, so you don't have the opportunity to be in the same place at the same time with your people. And that, you're afraid, is going to hold you back. My recommendation is to rethink that for a moment. Because most of those people are concerned about what time did they get to work? Did they get to work on time? And why did he leave early? What was going on there? It's seldom that a manager really stands over a worker and watches them work to make sure they're being productive. Just not like that. So my recommendation is manage the outcomes, not the clock. The outcomes are what you're paying for. You noticed at the beginning of this presentation, I took the title Senior Resultant. That's because I believe it's all about results. Everything is all about results. You can tell me how hard you tried. I don't care. I'm concerned about results, outcomes. So manage the outcomes, not the clock. And to do so, what you want to do is to track progress and timely completion with workflow automation. Use workflow automation so you can always see how people are progressing through their work and always see when they've completed and that it was completed on time, within budget, and at a level of excellence in excess of your expectations. You can do that on a workflow automation system. And there are some really great ones out there, and more of them are emerging all the time. Here's the second challenge. Social isolation. Yeah, people are working from home. It's their home, so they should be comfortable there. But they're accustomed to working around a lot of people. They're accustomed to the hubbub. They're accustomed to people pushing and shoving and meeting around the water cooler and all that stuff. They don't want to be alone all the time. Nobody wants to be alone all the time. What they need is a sense that they belong somewhere. Now, that sense of belonging is smack dab in the middle of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is a very popular triangle that Maslow produced that says at the base, at the bottom, are the foundational needs, air, water, food, shelter, sleep. And at the top is that magical self-actualization where we're doing all the things we ever dreamt of doing and life is really good. But smack dab in the middle is love and belonging, a sense of connection to other people. It is a need. It is not something that's nice to have. People need to have a sense of belonging, a sense of connection with other people. I mentioned water cooler. I think the water cooler is a great model for what we need to do. Establish an opportunity, like a chat room, for example, where everybody can come, hop on their camera, and see all their friends hanging out in the break room or by the water cooler, and just talk. And if they want to break off in, one-on-one conversations, they certainly can. But if they want to stay in the group because somebody's telling jokes or telling a story, what have you, give them an opportunity to be people with each other, I guess is what I'm saying. We need to be people with each other. It's a need. It's inherent in being a human being. The Society for Human Resources Management has a list that they've shared with us that starts with being available. Because people can't just hover by your office or just sneak up on you, they need to know that they can reach you if they have a question or they need some guidance. Because if they can't reach you, that may just stop them in their tracks. They may not be able to go any further. And that's as frustrating for them as it ends up being for you, maybe more so. So be available for them. Set your expectations with them so they know what you expect them to produce. You expect them to produce X per day or X per week or X within the next month or however you like to manage it. Manage it clearly in a detailed fashion so everybody knows for sure what's expected of them. Be organized. It's important to be organized, more organized when you're working with people through mediated communication. Like, for example, when you have a meeting, have an agenda and follow that agenda, but be flexible. Allow people to interject and add things into it, but start with a structure. And I mentioned meetings, yes, have an agenda, but also think about shortening your meetings, right? Meetings where minutes are kept and hours are lost can be very frustrating when you're sitting alone in front of a computer with the possibility of doing email or other stuff that you want to get done, you may lose people who've developed the ability to keep staring into the camera while they're working on the left-hand side there. Adjust them. Let's make meetings shorter. Stick to the agenda, get through the agenda, achieve the results you want to achieve with the meeting, and move on. They agree with what we said before about tracking your work progress. What you don't want to do is catch them failing. That's the worst thing. Better that you catch them early when they're falling behind and help them to catch up so they do get in on time. They do get their work finished on time, that is. It's always nice to catch your people doing something wonderful. So let's try and make it more of that. We're going to emphasize communication here. It's something you're going to have to actively do. You can't just happen into somebody and, casually talk about something. You're going to have to reach out to people. And you need to encourage some people to do that outreach. For some people, it's just not that easy. Understand that. Be sensitive to that. And help them. Remember that this communication is a two-way street. So it's crucial to listen. Listen, listen, and listen are the three best things I can tell you to do. Remember to listen, especially when you're on a mediated connection across video conferencing or telephone or what have you, because it discourages people when they know you're not listening. Help those people who are having a hard time build their connections. Introduce them to the people you think they need to know or should know. Make more introductions. Connect more people together. And be available to help them as necessary to continue developing those relationships and building that teamwork. Provide a way to collaborate. We'll talk about this a little bit more later, but there needs to be a platform that they can use to collaborate with each other. It needs to have cool features like simultaneous editing so that they can work together more efficiently than ever before. We'll touch more on that a little bit later. For those of you who micromanage, forget about it. You're not going to be able to micromanage in this environment. It's just not possible remotely. Anybody who can do it shouldn't be doing it. And if you can do it, don't tell anybody how you do it. But consider stopping. Let your people do their thing. Monitor their progress, monitor their completions, but don't be, all over them, because not for nothing, you're going to be wasting a ton of time communicating with them across a connection, as opposed to hovering over them and tapping them on the shoulder. Let's try to cure micromanaging if we possibly can. Always celebrate success. On a shop floor or in a sales pit, there's always a bell to ring when somebody does something great. There's always a leaderboard that somebody's name goes up on, something like that. Those things can be duplicated in your team communications platform. There's no reason why they can't. Find ways to. Make celebration an important part of daily life in your distributed workforce. Harvard Business Review, HBR, also has a list that helps us. The first thing on their list is to manage the whole person. Now, this is advice that most managers receive at least once during their career, probably more than that. Manage the whole person. The person you're managing is not just a worker. They're not just here. They're not just on planet Earth to do what you need them to do. They have a life. They have relatives. They have friends. They have problems. They have challenges. If you try to manage them coldly by task, you're never going to develop the kind of relationship that optimizes the way in which people work and creates a great working experience for them. So you need to constantly look for opportunities to offer encouragement. And you also need to be careful to look for situations in which those people need your emotional support, especially with the pandemic. Everybody probably has somebody they know, a friend, a family member, somebody who has either got the virus or has died from the virus, and that's horrible. And those people need your understanding. They need your sensitivity. This is a really good time to practice being a real human being and to show them that you do care about them as a person. Not for nothing, and I don't mean to be pragmatic about it, but you will have a far better, far more dedicated employee if you show that employee the respect due to a human being. Be sure to provide opportunities for remote social interaction. There we go again. We're back to the water cooler idea and the idea of having group meetings on video conferencing. I just saw an ad today, actually, for one of the food delivery services offering to deliver lunch to all of your people wherever it is they reside and have it all arrive at the same time so that you can begin a lunch meeting with them with everybody having lunch. I think that's a great idea. I'm got to try that out, but it's a great idea. We talked about, being people with each other. Share a meal. Interesting new idea. It's advisable to have a structured daily check-in with each of your people. IBM tells us that you cannot manage more than 8 people. No manager can manage more than 8 people. Whether you agree or disagree with that, you're close to that, somewhere around that. And that many people, you can make 5 minutes for each in the course of a day, just to check in with them, answer any questions that might be outstanding, let them know you're still out there, and that you know that they're still there. Good advice, good suggestion. When you're providing technology for communication, be sure to offer alternatives. Remember that things break, especially right now when they're getting overloaded by the number of people using them. Internet access can go down, telephone towers can go down, anything can go down. There's got to be at least one alternative that your people can turn to so that they don't get cut off completely until that service is restored. Make at least one of those choices mobile. Some of your people may want to work out in the backyard. If they're more productive there, hey, why not let them? Establish a set of rules of engagement for everybody so that nobody feels they're being treated unfairly, that everybody is being treated pretty much the same way during this difficult period of distribution. Setting expectations as to how people will conduct themselves and how people will do things is always a good way to establish that ground level of coordination. And it's a very good thing to do even if you're not spread out at everybody's homes. Be sure, and this goes back to being available, be sure that all your employees, especially the ones who report directly to you, know what is the best time to reach you and the best way to reach you. Some of you like texting. Others like Facebook Messenger. Others are strictly email, got to be email, and some of you are still phone people. Let your employees know that so they know which way you're monitoring, which channel you'll be responding on, and they can have a better chance of reaching you when they want to. There are going to be times during the day when you don't want to be disturbed or have any communication with them because you want to focus on getting something done. That's fair. Each of us deserves that time. So set that time. Make sure people know that it's a predictable time so that they don't have to find out because they don't get an answer from you. You, as a leader, as a manager, have to maintain an example of being really positive, really enthusiastic, and really confident that things are going to be okay. You're their leader, and people will follow your cue. If you're crabby, they'll be crabby. If you're frustrated, they'll get frustrated. And so anything you do in that regard, it comes back to bite you in so many ways. Oh, yeah. While we're at it, since this is being presented by 2 technology publications, we should, and sponsored by 4 technology companies, we should spend at least a few minutes on technology. So here's my checklist. Cloud-based everything. This is a good time to democratize your network so that everybody has the same level of access no matter where they are. If you've been migrating to the cloud, try to accelerate the migration so that you're all into the cloud as soon as possible. Provide an online productivity suite, as we talked about a little bit earlier, that provides simultaneous editing, all the applications in one platform. The more that platform offers, the better, the more robust it is, the more secure it is too, was also important. Another application that's kind of a must at this point is Unified Communications as a Service, UCaaS. Without it, your people are going to be cut off from each other. Telephone lines are getting overloaded all the time, but even more important than that, UCaaS gives you a universal inbox. All the messaging goes to one place. They don't have to keep checking different channels. And all of the outbound messaging, texting, calling, video, application sharing, you name it, it's all in one platform. It's all in one place, and they can move from one to the next effortlessly. So a UCaaS platform is really important. The more coordinated it is with your product, your productivity suite, the better off you are. We talked several times about automated workflow management, crucial. Customer relationship management. If you don't have CRM in place now's a good time to start thinking about it. ERP, you use an enterprise resource planning application to run your business. Your people need access to that, obviously. Some of them are going to need project management tools as they work on projects because it'll help them keep the coordination going. Whatever you do, automate all data backup. Everybody's endpoints, all the servers involved, the cloud services involved, no matter what it is you're using, back it up automatically. Because when you're working from home, it's easy to forget that you didn't back up today. Make sure it's backed up for them day in, day out. Find yourself the best possible data management platform for your organization. And be sure to provide security at every layer, from multi-factor authentication and authorization through anti-malware, anti-spam, anti-virus, anti-anti, intrusion prevention systems, firewalls, data encryption, you name it. Make sure it's all there because your security is only as strong as its weakest link. I wanted to focus just quickly on UCaaS because it is crucial. The trick in doing one-on-one over UCaaS is to get that glass to disappear. You have a pane of glass in front of you between you and the other person. They have the same thing. The more you let it disappear, like Longfellow's willing suspension of disbelief, forget about the glass. Just talk to each other. You'll notice this woman has a coffee cup right there on her table. She's having a coffee meeting with this gentleman. Nice, personal. They're being people together. That's what it's all about. Be sensitive to paralinguistics. Many people say that the problem with video conferencing is that you lose the paralinguistics, the way people communicate beyond the words that they say. Well, I'm here to suggest that a lot of the paralinguistics still come through. The most prominent paralinguistic is facial expression. Now, they can see each other's faces. Second one is eye movement. They can see each other's eyes. Third is gestures. They can see each other's hands pretty much most of the time. Another one is posture. How is that person sitting? Are their arms crossed? Are they sitting back? Are they leaning forward? You can pretty much see that. We're missing smell-o-vision. You can't smell the other person. But
Please stand by as we reconnect our presenter.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. While we are waiting for Howard to join us again, I want to remind everybody that we are in the middle of, or at the very first session of the Remote Workforce Summit that's brought to you by Call Tower, Okta, Smart Deploy, and Red Hat. And It's like I said, it was the first of 3 information-packed sessions that you'll be joining us for today. Let's see. Oh, and I wanted to remind you that one lucky attendee will be receiving a Surface Pro. Let me try that a third time. A Surface Pro 8, the latest edition of Microsoft's ultra-light tablet featuring a laptop-class Intel Core processor, all-day battery, and HD cameras. But you must be present to win, so be sure to stick with us. We're let's see. We're waiting for Paula to reconnect with Howard, and he's very close to the end of his session. Stick with us because there are a couple of interesting questions in the Q&A box that I want to be sure to answer or have Howard answer. Let's see. And remember that you can type those questions into the Q&A box at any time. We'll do our best to get to all of them. And you'll want to stay tuned for our upcoming session, the 10 new best practices for a secure remote workforce. That session is being led by our friend, scientist, author, 20-time Microsoft MVP and commercial astronaut in training, Brian Posey. You should definitely check out Brian Posey's, I think it's called Brian Posey's Moonshot at Redmond Magazine. It's where he chronicles his astronaut and training efforts. He just recently told us that he did the part where you go into the water, and I thought that would be very, very scary. So interesting guy, brave, and a scientist as well. And he'll be talking about 10 new best practices for a secure remote workforce. That session will be moderated by my colleague, David Rammel, who leads the editorial team at Virtualization and Cloud Review. And it looks like, how are we doing, Paula? Where are we on reconnecting with Howard? I want to be sure the attendees get the rest of this great session. Howard is one of our longtime presenters, very smart guy, and his insights into this, I would argue, not controversial exactly, but kind of confusing topic because you see statistics on worker productivity, and some of it goes against what might be intuitively felt by managers who really need a high level of control because there's a lot at stake, for their company, in good worker productivity, and this remote workforce situation was thrust upon us. It wasn't a choice based on some of the statistics that Howard is citing, where we look up and say, well, they're going to be more productive at home. Let's go ahead and make that hybrid workforce how we want to do it. We certainly didn't have a choice. Thank you, COVID-19. And now we're struggling again with the variant. So, okay, let's see here. Let's see. I'm getting, I don't see any. Yep, the audio is still not working for us. But listen, be sure to check out this. And this is sorry for the technical glitch. This truth sucks. I apologize. But this is just one of many summits that we host at 1105 Media Publications like Redmond Magazine and Virtualization and Cloud Review. You can go to those websites, and there's a long list of existing webinars and summits and webcasts and tech talks that are all available on demand. You just have to click on them and register, and you get all this great content. You get access to the slides. You get the additional resources that are provided by the sponsors for those various summits and webcasts, and it just tends to be just absolutely great material. We do put together insightful, I would argue, and expert presentations from people who are in the field and who, are, have their finger on the pulse, so to speak. So among the questions that we got, or one of the comments we got from the attendees, is that, it's not a question, but I appreciate the humor sprinkle of the presentation, and that's one of the things I like about Howard as well. Is he's a funny guy, and he's got a definite point of view, but he also has a high level of expertise, and that's what we really try to bring to these events. We try to make sure that we get independent experts, people who have their own consulting practices, or their advisors sort of outside of the companies that sponsor the events. We don't want to have any biased information. We want to get their take, but we also love to engage with a conversation. One of our attendees has observed that there seems to be a huge assumption underlying this discussion that people are comfortable at home, working or not. Are we transferring our biased experience to others en masse? And that's one I definitely want. Howard is back with us. Thank the Lord.
Oh, boy. Sorry about that. I don't know. Howard. Looks like I wasn't gone too long. Where did I leave off? I think you're on slide 32 or 3. Let me look at the...
So you were still in the office, okay. Yeah. You were going down your list, as I recall.
Yeah. Okay, a roomy work surface, not too comfortable chair, good lighting, watch out for eye strain, a fully configured computer that can connect to your network and is secured adequately for your network, a headset to block out all sound, preferably one with good noise reduction, internet access, either Wi-Fi or cable, and a printer. Those are all good, but the most important piece of equipment in the room is that one on the far left of the screen, a door. Be sure you have a door to close out the outside world. I will tell you, in my own case, when I moved from an open space into a room with a door, my life changed. So be sure you do that. This is the last thought I really wanted to show you is this group. These people all work for Zoom. And what do you notice about the photo? They're all smiling. They're all smiling because they're in a water cooler meeting. And they're having a really, really good time at that water cooler meeting. So it's important. It's let people be people with each other. And that really is the kind of final point I wanted to make. As we go to questions, if we have any time left for them, sorry about that. Okta has a wonderful document called How to Prepare Your Workforce for Success. In charts and graphs like these, the other sponsors of today's show are all represented. You'll notice that some of the longtime favorites like Palo Alto, Citrix, and Cisco are way up top. They've been around forever, and they're still some of the fastest growing apps. It's very exciting. So the URL is right here. You can get this deck after the show if you miss it right here. But with that, I'm sorry, John. Do we have any questions?
No worries, Howard. As a matter of fact, we do. And during your brief absence, I was commenting that one of them that I thought I would like to have you answer is this. Seems to be a huge assumption underlying this discussion that people are comfortable at home, working or not. Are we transferring our biased experience to others en masse?
Well, I'll tell you what. I don't know. To prepare for this presentation, I looked at more than several, maybe dozens of surveys. And the stats that you saw there were drawn from some very reliable sources. I'm sorry, you may have missed it, but I did indicate them up at the top of the screen with their logos. Some of those stats came from other sources that I just thought were good and supportive. I may personally be transferring my biased experience. I've loved working at home for the last 13 years. But the information you saw on these slides comes from those statistics from those surveys. What else you got, John?
Okay, so Let me look here. We've got quite a few here. They're kind of coming in fast and furious now all of a sudden.
That's great.
Let's see. Let's do this one here. Do you recommend a particular UCAS platform for the Activity Suite?
No, I don't. No,
That was easy.
no, I don't. Yeah, I can't. Being a journalist and being an analyst, it would be improper for me to recommend any one particular productivity suite over the other. And the fact of the matter is that they're all in very close competition these days. So just think about what you want from yours. What features do you really, really want? Try them out. Most of them will give you a free 30-day period. See how they work. If they work in a way that's comfortable for you and yours, that's great. That's the most important thing. If not, pick something else.
Here's one. This attendee, what's your opinion? If we track work-from-home employees by progress and output, should the hourly worker go away? Should all work-from-home workers be salaried workers?
No, an hour is as much a unit of time as a day is. I'm sorry. If you have an hourly worker and you agree that they're going to provide X service and it's going to take X hours, well, the typical rule that I've seen obeyed by most managers is either fulfill the obligation or communicate the exception. If it's not going to get done within these allotted hours, tell me, and let's figure out what we want to do. Let's make a decision about extending the hours or you just getting it done if you want to get paid. That's not friendly, but it kind of boils down to that sometimes. And a day, I mean, for most people, a day is an 8-hour day. For professionals, it's a 10-hour day. For technology people, it's a 20 to 24-hour day. It varies, but you can definitely allot a certain amount of work into that time given.
Awesome. Well, Howard, thank you so much. Looks like that's all the time we have for this session. We're going to take a short break here. Thank you, Howard, for a great session.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody.
We're going to take a short break now, but we'll be back at the top of the hour for our second session, the 10 best practices for a secure remote workforce, led by scientist, author, and 20-time Microsoft MVP and commercial astronaut in training, Brian Posey, and moderated by my colleague, David Ramel, who leads the editorial juggernaut that is Virtualization and Cloud Review. Many thanks to Howard M. Cohen for this. Many thanks to Howard M. Cohen for this great session, and to our sponsors, Call Tower, Okta, Smart Deploy, and Red Hat for making it possible. Now would be a great time to check out those extra resources on your console provided by our sponsors. And remember, during today's third session, we will be giving away a Surface Pro 8. But you must be present to win, so stay tuned. Back in a few.
Welcome back to our second session. David, please take it away.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you to our speakers, my fellow moderators, and of course, Call Tower, Okta, Smart Deploy, and Red Hat for underwriting this summit and allowing us to bring you this great content. I'm David Rammel, editor of Virtualization and Cloud Review, here to moderate the second session of our summit called the 10 New Best Practices for a Secure Remote Workforce. Our speaker for this session is Brian Posey, a 20-time Microsoft MVP and technology writer. Throughout his career, Brian has written or contributed to dozens of IT books, created numerous full-length video training courses, and published thousands of blog posts on a huge variety of IT and space-related topics. Many of those blog posts can be found in his Posey's Tips and Tricks column or in his new Posey's Moonshot column at redmondmag.com. Brian, it's great to have you here. Please take it away.
Hey, thank you so much. It sounds like it's been a great summit so far. I caught the last few minutes of the previous session. It sounds like it was some really interesting stuff. But yeah, as David said, I'm Brian Posey, a 20-time Microsoft MVP and commercial astronaut candidate. And I just got home from doing my first underwater spacewalk. You can see a picture here. Unfortunately, they wouldn't let me use a spacesuit for it because thanks to COVID, I hadn't been in a spacesuit in 2 years, but we used dry suits and it kind of gave the same neutral buoyancy effect. So what you see in that picture is a mock-up of the Quest airlock on the International Space Station. So they actually put me inside of the airlock. I had to come out, use tethers, make my way over to that toolbox, the big black thing you see in the picture, get some tools, and then work my way across a series of trusses and actually do a repair job on the outside of the space station. It was quite the experience, and I got to do that a few times. But anyway, enough about me. Let's go ahead and get started. So being that this is the Remote Workforce Summit, I wanted to talk about the very nature of remote work. You know, a lot has changed in the last few years, and at first I thought that it wouldn't affect me at all because I've been working full-time remote since the year 2000. Back then, I walked away from my corporate job to become a full-time freelancer, and I've been working at home ever since. I feel extremely fortunate. I can't imagine ever having to go back into an office. But the remote work thing is new for a lot of places. And one of the big lessons that I think we've learned over the last couple of years is that remote work can indeed be practical. Maybe not for everybody, but for most people. You know, before the pandemic set in, I think that there was already a bit of a push that was underway regarding remote work. People were starting to realize that the technology existed, that it would allow them to work from anywhere. But in a lot of cases, there was pushback from managers. I heard all kinds of stories. I heard about managers who just wanted to be able to micromanage their people and felt they couldn't do that if they were working remotely. I've actually heard stories of managers who said if somebody is working remotely, they're not actually working. And then there are a million other things, as I'm sure you can imagine, and have probably even experienced to some degree. But I think that we've proven conclusively that in the vast majority of cases, remote work works. So now I think the next logical step is to take a step back and figure out how we can do remote work smartly. And by smartly, I primarily mean securely, especially in light of this presentation. So one of the things that you have to stop and think about is that at the onset of the pandemic, yes, there were a lot of organizations that allowed employees to work remotely, but almost nobody was set up to allow everybody to work remotely all at the same time. So organizations had to scramble and figure out what in the world they could put into place quickly to allow everybody to suddenly work remotely. And by and large, everybody got it done. I mean, I think that's a real testament to the innovative nature of IT professionals such as yourself. And great job, everyone. But now that we've had some time, the next step is to take a step back and look at what works and what doesn't. Because, you know, organizations put a lot of money and other investment into their remote work architecture. And the pandemic will eventually end. But when it does, these organizations aren't going to be anxious to give up that investment that they've made. So my guess is that even though the pandemic will end, I mean, history has shown that, even the bubonic plague back in the Middle Ages, as horrible as it was, it eventually ran its course. And this will too. But when the pandemic does end, I think that remote work is going to be here to stay, at least optionally. Certainly there will be some organizations that still require their employees to work remotely, because think about it from a financial perspective. those big office buildings cost a lot of money, and organizations are realizing that by scaling back their real estate investment, they can save a fortune, not to mention all the utilities that they're saving, not powering all those desktop PCs and providing heating and cooling and things like that. There's a substantial amount of money to be saved, thereby making the organization more profitable. So certainly some organizations will continue to use 100% remote work. Other organizations are going to make remote work optional. But the point is, the pandemic has changed everything, and remote work, at least in some capacity, is here to stay, probably permanently. So it makes a lot of sense to take a look at what we can do to make sure that remote work is being done securely. And that's what this presentation is all about. Now, one disclaimer before I really jump into the meat of the presentation is that the presentation was titled, I think, 10 new best practices for remote work security or something to that effect. I don't have it in front of me. I can't tell you exactly what the title was. But having said that, there really aren't 10 best practices. I came up with 10, but to be perfectly honest with you, it was super tough to narrow this down to 10 best practices. There are, in reality, a whole lot more. So my goal here isn't to give you 10 best practices that you can walk away with and say, yes, these are definitively the 10 things I need to be doing right here, right now. Instead, my goal is to get you thinking about some things that maybe you hadn't thought of just yet, about what you can be doing to make the whole remote work experience a lot more secure than what it might currently be. So that's where we're going with this presentation. So step number one of the top 10 best practices is to take a multi-layered approach to addressing vulnerabilities. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in any organization, big or small, there are any number of different IT components that are in use. And any one of those components or any combination of those components could potentially pose a security vulnerability. So my recommendation is to take a multi-level approach to looking for those vulnerabilities. Rather than focusing on one specific aspect or following one specific set of best practices, look at it on a variety of different levels, because vulnerabilities can exist at any layer within the entire IT stack. So in your own home, for example, you've probably got PCs or Macs, maybe a combination of the two. You've probably got a wireless access point, maybe some other devices such as smart TVs or a smart thermostat or other IP devices that connect to your network. Any one of those could pose a vulnerability. So seeking out vulnerabilities in that type of environment would be looking not just at the individual devices and how those are configured, but the individual classes of devices that are communicating on your network and what types of vulnerabilities might apply to a particular device class. Now, in a corporate environment, of course, things are a bit more complicated. Certainly, we've got endpoints, and that's one of the big areas where you need to focus your security efforts. I'll be talking about that quite a bit as we go along. But there are many other resources that need to be examined too. For example, SaaS applications. You know, the SaaS vendors invest enormous resources into making sure that their applications are secure. But that doesn't mean that SaaS applications are 100% secure. Oftentimes, security comes down to the way that those applications are configured. So SaaS applications are indeed something that you need to look at. Also, your VPN. That's another thing I'm going to be talking about later on as we move along, but a VPN can potentially become a point at which security is compromised. Another thing is Active Directory, another potential point of vulnerability. Your legacy applications, on-premises servers, and the list goes on and on. And one thing to keep in mind is that for any one of these components that I've talked about, there are multiple levels at which a vulnerability might exist. Take Active Directory, for example. Yes, we've got the Active Directory structure, but if you look just beneath that structure, you've got individual domain controllers, you've got DNS servers. So you've got all of these individual components that are making up that part of the infrastructure, and any one of those components could potentially contain vulnerabilities. So that's what I mean when I say that you need to take a multi-layered approach when looking for security vulnerabilities. And yes, I'm focusing this presentation largely on remote work, but this is one of those best practices that can apply to on-premises work equally well. So number 2, treat all endpoint devices as untrusted. And this is a big one. This is a really big one, actually. You know, quite a ways back, it's been, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years if I had to guess, somebody asked me, what's the number one vulnerability that exists on the average corporate network? And without even really having to stop and think about it, I immediately said desktop PCs. And there were numerous reasons for that. One of the big reasons is that most of the organizations that I had worked with up to that point in time were investing tremendous resources into hardening their servers, but were largely neglecting desktop PCs. Oftentimes, user tampering was rampant. That was especially true back in the 90s when we had operating systems like Windows 98 and users could get in and do anything that they want. But even when we moved past that, user tampering was often a factor. I couldn't even begin to tell you how many organizations I've seen over the years that, for better or worse, end up giving their users full local admin permissions on their PCs. And then users can go in and do anything that they want. I've seen users install video games that had malware in them, or go in and remove operating system files to reclaim a little bit of hard disk space, or you name it. I could probably do a whole presentation just on stupid user stories. But even if you take all of that out of the picture, there are still other things that can come into play with regard to endpoints. Maintenance issues is a huge one. In a carefully controlled corporate environment where all of the desktops are domain joined and things like that, we've typically got WSUS or some other application that is responsible for pushing patches to all of the endpoint devices and checking to make sure that the devices comply with all of the current security best practices. And that's great. That needs to be in place. But having said that, what you can run into sometimes is a PC, for whatever reason, might glitch out and miss an update, or might experience a configuration drift due to something that IT has done that has an unintended effect. So even in those environments where security is carefully controlled and configurations are carefully controlled, vulnerabilities can creep in. So I recommend treating all of those PCs as untrusted. Now, what about remote work? Well, when it comes to remote work, we don't have the benefit of all of those devices being domain joined. Users are working from home very often from personal devices, and by their very nature, those devices need to be untrusted. So what do we do about that? Well, this is something I'm going to get into a little bit more later on with some of the other points. But as a best practice, I recommend applying security to endpoint devices wherever you can. Now, if a device is owned by an employee, there's going to be a limit to the amount of security that you're going to be able to apply to that device. I mean, it's their own device, so you can't make it so that they can't use that device for anything but work stuff. But apply security to endpoint devices wherever you can. But regardless of the amount of security that you manage to apply to those devices, treat the device as though it's untrusted, whether you actually regard it as being secure or not. So that concept applies across the board, whether we're talking about tightly controlled domain-joined PCs, or if we're talking about an end user's iPad or their own personal PC or whatever. Because remember, personal devices exist in an unknown state. So number 3, begin working towards zero trust security. Now, I'm sure that most of the people who are listening to me right now are probably familiar at least some level with zero trust security. But for anybody who's not, it's basically the idea that nothing should be trusted automatically. Everything needs to be proven to be trustworthy rather than just assuming that it's trustworthy. Now, there are a few things to keep in mind with regard to zero trust security. And for anybody who may be wondering, yes, I'm a big believer in zero trust security. I think it absolutely has its place. But a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, zero trust security is an architecture, not a product, or it might even be better described as a philosophy rather than a product. There's no product that you can go out and buy right now that will automatically make your organization zero trust, even though I've seen a couple of security products that market themselves that way. Also, zero trust is a journey, not a destination. No matter how much security you apply on your network, you'll probably never get to the point that everything is fully zero trust compliant, whatever that even means. More than likely, there are always going to be some assumed trust that exists, and in some cases, that's okay. So, what are some best practices regarding the implementation of zero trust? Well, one of the first things is zero trust implementation can be a really long process, and going back to what I said a second ago, it's one of those things that you may never fully even arrive at. Because just because your organization adheres to zero trust principles today doesn't necessarily mean that it will tomorrow. Remember, IT is highly dynamic. You're constantly acquiring new devices and new architectures and things like that, and that needs to be brought into your zero trust ecosystem. So it's one of those things that's always evolving. That being the case, implementing zero trust can take a while, and it's probably never fully going to be done. So I would recommend, if you're just getting started, begin your efforts by looking at whatever areas of zero trust security are going to have the best impact on your overall security. For example, you might start by taking a zero trust approach to endpoint devices. That would be a really good place to start. But it's not the only place to start. If you, on the other hand, consider your legacy applications to be a bigger threat to security, then maybe that's an area where you could start your zero trust efforts and then branch out from there once you've locked down those applications. Conversely, there is such a thing as taking zero trust security too far. Because remember, IT exists for one reason and one reason only. IT's job is to use technology to help solve business problems and to help the business achieve its business goals. And when you take security too far, you can actually stand in the way of achieving that goal. You can make the business less efficient. You can make it harder for users to do their jobs. So there has to be this balance between security and functionality. I know that's not necessarily a popular opinion in security circles, but it's reality. So you've got to avoid taking zero trust so far that the security becomes disruptive. And then sometimes security can even become meaningless. Several years back, I had a vendor, I won't name any names, but I had a vendor that was proudly showing me a new technology that was designed to adhere to the zero trust architecture. And what they were doing with it is making it so that a PC, I'm talking about just a regular desktop PC, didn't trust the keyboard or the mouse until that keyboard and mouse had given a certificate proving that it was what it claimed to be. If you really think about that from a security standpoint, what benefit does that prove, or what benefit does that provide, rather? There's really no benefit from the standpoint of a desktop PC to making the keyboard or the mouse untrusted. A keyboard is a keyboard. Now, I could see in a highly regulated corporate data center setting up servers in a way where they won't accept having a keyboard plugged in. Certainly there's a benefit to that. But even then, you have to question that if your physical security is so lax that somebody can walk in there with a keyboard, you've got bigger problems. But I just wanted to give you a few things to think about with regard to zero trust security. Best practice number 4, adopt conditional access policies. Now, conditional access policies exist within Microsoft Azure, and they're one of those things that I could probably do an entire presentation on. But I want to go ahead and give you just a taste of what conditional access policies are and what their benefit is, just for the benefit of anybody who might not be familiar with them. So conditional access policies make it so that there are a variety of things that Windows is able to look at when it's deciding whether or not to give a user access to a particular resource. Historically, resource access has been, or access to resources has been based around the group structure and access control list. So typically what an organization will do is they'll create a group of users who need access to a particular resource, and then they'll create an access control list that provides access to the group members. Simple enough. That's the way it's been done for decades. But sometimes that might not necessarily be enough, especially when we start talking about remote work, because a user who's working from home on a personal device might have a different level of risk associated with their session than a user who is logged on premises from a carefully controlled domain-joined corporate desktop, and you know exactly how it's configured. You know that the user is who they claim to be because they're sitting right there in their seat. Things can vary depending on a user's location and any number of other factors, and that's where conditional access policies come into play. Rather than granting access based on a really rigid access control list, conditional access policies let you look at a number of different factors. And conditional access policies, they also play really well into the whole zero trust thing, because you aren't just blindly giving a user access to something based on a group membership. You're doing some extra checks to make sure that that user really should be accessing what it is that they're trying to access. Another benefit to using conditional access policies is that they can help in your defenses against malware. Because remember, malware generally runs under the same security context as the user who initiated it. So if a user clicks on a malicious link and activates some type of malware, that malware is going to have the same level of permissions as the user who launched it. And if you've got conditional access policies standing in the way of accessing a particular resource saying, hey, this just doesn't look right, well, then those conditional access policies might, in some circumstances, be able to block a malware infection that otherwise would have happened without those policies being in place. Now, conditional access policies, as I mentioned, are a part of Azure AD, but they require an Azure AD Premium P1 subscription, so it's not something that you're going to get with the base package. The way that I like to think of conditional access policies from an architectural standpoint is that they're like an if-then statement. The if portion of the statement is known as a signal, and the then portion of the statement is known as a decision. So what does this really mean? Well, let's take something really simple like group memberships. The signal might be a group membership. The decision might be if the user is a member of this group, then we'll allow them to access this resource. But certainly group membership isn't the only type of signal. There are many, many others, and I've listed a few on the slide. The user account is one type of signal. Now, I don't really recommend using that because it can be hard to manage if you start granting access to things based on individual users. It's much better to use groups. Group memberships are a signal. Device type can also be a signal. And not just device type, but the device OS, whether or not the device is jailbroken, whether or not the device is regarded as healthy or compliant. The IP address, is the user logging on from a trusted location such as your corporate office? Are they logging in from the same country that you're in, or are they logging in from a rogue nation somewhere? Also, which application is the user accessing? That can be another signal that can play into a conditional access policy. Another thing is something called real-time calculated risk. Now, I don't want to get too far off in the weeds here, but real-time calculated risk is basically Microsoft speak for taking a look at what it is that the user is trying to do and looking at, okay, are they doing something that's really risky here? Are they doing something that's abnormal for them? Because if you've got the same user that logs on at 9 a.m. every workday and accesses the same resource, well, that's a very recognizable pattern of activity. But if that same user were to try to access that same resource at 3 o'clock in the morning from a country somewhere on the other side of the planet, well, then that might be a signal that things aren't on the up and up, and that's something that you probably want to take a closer look at. And it may not be in your best interest to allow that user to access that resource. That's what conditional access policies are really all about. So what about decisions? Well, obviously, when you're making an access control decision, you can choose to grant access to the resource or you can deny access to the resource. But there is a little bit of a gray area in between. You can grant access but with restrictions. For example, if a user tries to access a particular resource and they're doing it from a home device that may or may not be secure, well, then maybe you want to allow access to that resource, but you want to require multi-factor authentication just to make sure that the user is who they claim to be. You can also make sure that the user is logging on with a device that's compliant with the standards that you've put into place. I'll show you an example of that a little bit later on. You can also make sure that the user is logging on from an approved client application. Maybe that means a specific browser or a dedicated application such as Outlook or something like that. You can also require that the device be Azure AD joined. Now, as I said, I don't want to get too far off into the weeds with regard to conditional access policies because there are several other things that I still need to talk about. But I do want to give you a few words of caution for anybody who might be considering taking a look at conditional access policies. The first thing that I want to caution you about is to beware of blanket policies. Now, when it comes to IT security, I'm a big believer in keeping things simple. That's actually something I'm going to be talking about more as we go along. And blanket policies are indeed simple. What I mean by a blanket policy is a policy that states, okay, every single person in the organization needs to adhere to this policy. That's a blanket policy. But those types of things can really come back to bite you when you start talking about conditional access policies because it may not always work out the way that you expect. One particularly good example of that is your service accounts. Let's suppose for a moment that you decide, okay, I want everybody to use multi-factor authentication. Well, if you put that into place as a blanket policy, then all of a sudden your service accounts are required to use multi-factor authentication, which may not even be possible. And that could have a very adverse effect on your application. So that's one of those things that you need to think about. Another best practice is that when you do create a new conditional access policy, use report mode. What report mode will do is it will report on the outcome of the policy without actually enforcing the policy. So that way you have some time to find out what effect the policy is actually having in your environment before it does something that you don't like and starts breaking things. And then the best practice of all, and I recommend this even if you don't have a conditional access policy in place, is to always have a break glass account. A break glass account, from the standpoint of a conditional access policy, is an account that has full administrative privileges to everything, but it's an account that nobody uses. Take the credentials, lock them away in a safe somewhere, keep it secure. Don't use it except in an absolute emergency. The reason why I recommend having this type of account is because let's say that you create a conditional access policy and you lump all the administrative accounts into it, and something goes wrong and all of a sudden you've locked yourself out. Well, you need to have a way of getting back in, and that's what a break glass account can do for you. That's the only circumstance in which the break glass account should ever be used. So number 5, consider the security tools that are available to you. Pretty much every organization uses tools to implement security or to assess their security or to do security reporting or any number of other things. But having said that, those same tools that you rely upon for your security can actually have the opposite effect in some circumstances. I've seen so many examples of this over the years. And there are any number of reasons why the security tools can actually get in the way of your security. For example, some security tools are overly complex. This one isn't quite as bad as it used to be, but there was a time when enterprise software had a huge price tag. I guess it still does. And the vendors that created that software felt that they had to justify that high price tag by making their software so overly complex that you needed a certification program and hands-on instruction just to be able to use it. Thankfully, that trend seems to be reversing somewhat, and software tends to be simpler than it used to be. But a security tool that's overly complex can get in the way of security. I've also seen situations in which security tools can interfere with one another. If you've got two tools that are designed to do the same job or there's a little bit of overlap between them, those tools can, in the right circumstances, actually interfere with each other. I've also seen tools that are purchased and never deployed. That doesn't do a lot of good, or they're deployed poorly, and that goes back to that over-complexity. Also, coverage gaps between tools. Let's say that you purchase a tool for every conceivable security problem that you think you might have. You might address a lot of specific problems, but you're probably not going to get everything. There are going to be some blind spots in your overall security monitoring, and those blind spots can translate into vulnerabilities. Also, pricey tools can sometimes create a false sense of security. I've seen organizations that have said, okay, we spent X number of dollars on this best-of-breed security solution. We're secure. We don't have to worry about it anymore. And really, from a security perspective, that's one of the worst things that you can do, is putting all of your faith in a pricey tool, because any tool can potentially be exploited. Another thing is alert fatigue. If you've got a security monitoring solution in place and it generates so many alerts that you're constantly looking at meaningless alerts, well, then real alerts are probably going to slip through the cracks and go unnoticed. And then the last one on the list is that IT pros are busy and simply ignore a tool. I've seen that more times than I can count. Now, when it comes to security tools, I am a big believer in tools. You have to have security tools to keep your organization secure. But my approach is that when it comes to security tools, less is more. I would much rather have a handful of really good security tools that I can actually use rather than having a million tools that cover every potential aspect of the security infrastructure. And there's a good chance, sticking to that philosophy, that you may already have everything that you need. So my advice would be to spend some time and consider which tools you should actually be using and who is going to be responsible for those tools. That's another situation I've seen play out in the real world, is that a tool gets put into place and nobody actually gets assigned the responsibility of monitoring that particular tool, so it goes unused and unnoticed. And then once you've got all of those tools in place, go back to what I talked about with the very first point about taking a layered approach to security, and consider what gaps might actually exist and if there are any holes that you need to fill with additional tools. Number 6, complexity is the enemy of security. This is something that I've talked about on occasion before, and it boils down to a really simple concept. When you've got a block of code, the more complex that code is, the lengthier it is, the more potential there is for an exploitable security vulnerability to exist within that code. So the idea is that you can make that code more secure by optimizing the code, shrinking it down to its bare minimum. That same basic principle can also be applied to other areas of IT. Let me give you a really simple example, the operating system. Operating systems used to be really small. They used to fit on a floppy disk. Today, of course, that's not the case. Windows is multi-gigabyte in size. But there are things that you can do to shrink the size of the operating system. For example, you can and should uninstall any unnecessary roles or services or applications. And that can go a long way toward making troubleshooting easier too, because if you've eliminated everything that you don't need and you start having problems, well, all of those things that you've eliminated are things that you don't have to even think about throughout the troubleshooting process. So one of the goals with reducing complexity should be to shrink the operating system footprint while also reducing complexity. Now, the same principle also applies to your infrastructure components. If you don't need a particular appliance attached to your network, don't attach it. Also, try to keep things as organized as you possibly can. For example, don't reuse service accounts, because if you use the same service account for everything, what you can end up with is an account that accumulates privileges unnecessary. It's better to use dedicated service accounts for everything that requires a service account and to assign those really meaningful names so that you know what that account's purpose is. Incidentally, I'm a big believer in using meaningful names and detailed descriptions at any point that you can throughout the entire configuration process on your network. Also, try to do things in a really uniform way. I call this the Las Vegas approach. And what I mean by that is that there are two philosophies that the casinos in Las Vegas adopt with regard to security, and they seem to work especially well in IT. The first of those philosophies is to do things in a uniform way. Think about the card tables in Las Vegas. The dealers are taught to do everything in an extremely unified or in an extremely uniform way, so that way anything that's unusual stands out to the security people who are monitoring the games. You know, we've all heard stories about somebody moving their thumb the wrong way in a card game and having security on them instantly. That's because everything's done in a uniform way, so anything that's out of the ordinary stands out and is easy to recognize. That applies really well to IT too. If you do everything in a very specific way, then if you have something abnormal happen, it's going to make that abnormality a lot easier to spot. Another thing is that in the Las Vegas casinos, they're taught to look for anything that, as they call it, just doesn't look right. And I think that also applies to IT. You know, something just doesn't look right, doesn't appear to be the way that it should. There's probably a good reason for that, and it's probably worth your time to look into that a little bit. So number 7, consider using split tunneling VPN. Now, this is a weird one from a security standpoint, but there is a method to the madness. Split tunneling VPN, for anybody who's not familiar with it, is the idea that when you've got remote workers connecting to your office through a VPN, not everything that the user is doing needs to rely on that VPN. For example, if the user is doing casual web surfing, well, those packets probably don't need to go through your VPN and then back out to the internet when the user is already connected to the internet. The same thing goes for access to Microsoft 365. That user who's working from home can access Microsoft 365 directly. They don't need to go through your VPN to do it. So this is where split tunneling comes into play. Split tunneling is based on the idea that any packets that need to go to your corporate data center should, and everything else can be routed outside of your VPN. It doesn't need to traverse your VPN. Now, split tunneling is often discussed in the context of performance, because it allows you to decrease the number of packets that are flowing across your VPN, thereby helping to improve the overall performance for everybody else. It's also typically discussed in terms of cost, because you can reduce VPN licensing costs in some cases by decreasing the amount of users that are simultaneously sending traffic across that VPN. It doesn't always work out that way, but I've seen it done. But what about security? Well, split tunneling can help with security in at least some regard, because if you're routing things that aren't related to your corporate network outside of the VPN, well, then that traffic has no way of touching resources inside of your network. So if a user happens to access something malicious that they shouldn't, and they're not connected to your corporate VPN at the moment because they're using split tunneling and it's routed them around the VPN, well, you've minimized the chances that whatever it is that that user has come into contact with can do harm on your network. So number 8, remember lessons learned from the past. This is a big one. You know, some say that remote work is relatively new, especially in light of everything that's happened in the last couple of years. But even if that's true, components of remote work have been around for a really long time. And we've also seen countless examples throughout the history of IT of disruptive technologies that have come along and have totally changed the way that we've had to think about security. And in many cases, it's possible to learn from those lessons of the past just by going back and looking at what technologies were disruptive to security and what types of solutions were ultimately adopted in order to deal with those new security challenges. Wi-Fi and BYOD are two of the big ones that I can think of. You know, I mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation that I had been out for a few weeks doing some space training. And one of the guys that's relatively new to the program, I won't name his name, but he's only about 20 years old, and I'm in my 40s. So we have a totally different perspective on technology. It floored me when he mentioned it, but he grew up in a world where he has never been without Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi was around since before he was born. In my case, however, I was there when Wi-Fi was created, and I put Wi-Fi in my house back in the 90s. Back then, Wi-Fi cost an insane amount of money, and you practically needed a PhD in computer science to be able to deploy it. But of course, as with other things in technology, the price eventually came down, things got simpler. And as that happened, Wi-Fi really caught on. People started realizing that it was super convenient to be able to connect to a network wirelessly. And at first, organizations were super reluctant to allow employees to use Wi-Fi. The idea was that if packets could traverse the network wirelessly, then those packets could be intercepted. And that made a lot of IT security people really nervous. Because back then, it was all about physical security of the network. The company that I worked for at the time actually went to great lengths to make sure that any Ethernet jacks on the network that were unused were physically unplugged so that nobody could sneak into a remote corner of the building, plug in their laptop, and start sniffing packets on the network. So if there was that mindset, you can imagine how nervous Wi-Fi made everybody. But the problem was that employees liked Wi-Fi, and you started seeing shadow IT creep into the picture. People would go to Walmart or Best Buy or wherever, get a cheap access point, and plug it into a free jack in their office, and lo and behold, an organization had Wi-Fi whether they realized it or not. So as IT started catching on to this, they started realizing, okay, we have to embrace Wi-Fi, but we have to do it in a secure manner. And there were any number of mechanisms that were brought into the picture to make that secure. Everything from encryption to authentication as if the employee was connecting over a VPN, and a number of other things. So all of that is to say that there are lessons that we can look back to in the past and learn from as we embrace this new remote work architecture. Point number 9, be realistic about what your VPN can and cannot do. This one's kind of a pet peeve. There are a lot of marketing companies out there that market VPN as being sort of a security panacea. They make claims that your VPN can make you invisible to your ISP, to the companies whose websites you're accessing, and any number of things. The truth is, VPNs don't magically make you more secure. VPNs give you privacy, not security, and there's a huge difference between the two. So what is this difference? Well, privacy is essentially encrypting the packets as they flow across so that nobody can read what it is that you're doing. But that doesn't automatically give you security, because if a user happens to contract a malware infection, that malware infection is going to do the exact same thing, whether that user's machine is plugged directly into the corporate network or if the user is communicating with the corporate network from across the VPN. The malware doesn't care. That's what I mean when I say that a VPN will give you privacy but not security. So what kinds of threats are out there that you need to take into account? Well, there are so many things like ransomware, vulnerabilities from outdated or jailbroken operating systems, vulnerabilities from insecure locally installed applications, bad security configurations, things like turning off their user's firewall, stuff like that. So the real question is, what can you do about this? Because if you really stop and think about it, an end user could be working from nearly any type of device. It might be a PC, it might be a Mac, it might be an iPad, a phone, who knows what, and they could be working from anywhere. So if this user is connecting to your network from an unknown device, how do you make sure that that device isn't a threat to your network? Well, there are any number of solutions out there for this. One of the big solutions is to treat that user's device as a BYOD device, which is by the very definition untrusted. Remember what I said earlier, all end user devices should be treated as untrusted. And I like using Microsoft Intune for enforcement, because what it does is it allows you to create policies that dictate what it means for a device to be compliant with your organization's requirements. Now, this is another one of those things that I could really go into a lot of detail on. I don't have time, but I want to give you just a really short taste of this. So if you look at the screen, you can see the Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center, and this is the interface for Microsoft Intune. So if you click on Devices and then Policies and then click on Create Policy, you'll be taken to this screen right here. First, you have to go through the basic screen, which requires you to enter a name and a description for the policy that you're creating. But then you come to this screen. And the part of the screen that I've got expanded is the device health policies. So you can see that you can create policies around things like BitLocker being turned on and Secure Boot being enabled and requiring code integrity. And there are any number of other compliance settings that you can implement too. Now, one of the first things that you'll probably notice is that the settings that are described on the screen are specific to Windows. Microsoft Intune does allow you to create policies for other device types as well, so that you can deal with the security settings that are specific to those operating systems. So number 10, and there's a misprint on the slide. It's a repeat of the first slide. What this slide should really say is educate your end users. So users can't ignore security just because they're working from home. As I've already explained, a security vulnerability doesn't care if the user's sitting at home working on their laptop and connecting over a VPN, or if they're sitting in the corporate office. It can still be a threat to your environment. So you've got to educate users on the importance of security. And one of the things that I've never really heard anybody talk about, but that just kind of makes sense with me that I think is a good idea, is to adopt a shared responsibility model. You know, we talk about shared responsibility models in light of Microsoft Azure or Microsoft 365 with regard to data protection. The idea behind Microsoft's shared security model is that Microsoft is responsible for keeping the platform up and running, but subscribers are responsible for protecting their own data, whether that means backups or using a good security configuration or what have you. Well, the same basic concept can also be applied to work from home. You can use a shared responsibility model with your users. You tell your users that you'll provide the VPN, you'll make sure everything's secure on the corporate side, but they're responsible for making sure that they adhere to security best practices. Now, realistically, some users will, some won't. That's a given. But by creating a policy like that, you at least put the users in a security mindset. And beyond that, there are tools that you can use to help educate users about security. So let's take a look at one of those tools in the couple of minutes that I've got left. Microsoft 365 has something called the attack simulation training built in. The idea is that you can actually use this tool to launch a benign phishing attack against your end users. And by doing so, you can find out which users are susceptible to an attack, who's likely to fall for it, who's not likely to fall for it. And then you can go on and teach them how to recognize the attack and give them some training when they do fall for the attack. So this is what one of the interfaces looks like. And as you can see, you can choose which type of attack you want to initiate against your end users. In this case, a credential harvesting attack has been selected. And so then from there, you can choose what type of email message you want to send to the users. So these are all examples of real-world phishing messages. And you can pick and choose based on the type of message that you want to try to fool your users with. And then if a user falls for it, you can require training. Now, you can require training regardless of whether the user falls for it. or not. But generally what you want to do is just require training if a user clicks on a payload or if the user is compromised as a result of the attack that you're launching. So what happens if a user does fall for the attack? Well, generally they'll see an email message that looks like this, saying, it's okay, you're human, let's learn from this. And then as the user goes through the email, Microsoft 365 goes in and shows them the things that are telltale signs that this message wasn't a legitimate message, it was a phishing message. In this case, it's showing that the greeting on the message was generic. And then there are a few other things that are outlined in this message as well. And then the user receives an email saying that, hey, because you fell for this, you're required to take a bit of short training. You can see that this training session only takes 3 minutes to complete. The user clicks go to training, and they're taken to an interface that looks kind of like this. It essentially walks the user through a few different scenarios, like, hey, you get an email that asks you to take a survey so you get a free this, that, or the other. What should you do? And then it gives the user a few multiple choice options. They pick the option that they think is the most appropriate, and then the tool comes back and tells them why or why not what they chose was a good option. So I've covered a ton of information in a short amount of time. I'd like to go ahead and open it up for questions and answers.
Okay, great job. And we do have several audience questions. Let's get right to them. First one comes from Asim. He says, some organizations encourage laptop login, such as YubiKey, and I've seen countless hours wasted when one gets locked out. I think you addressed this lockout issue in your presentation, Brian. And he continues, how do you balance in going too far for zero trust?
Yeah, that is exactly what I was talking about security going too far. I think at that point, you pretty much have to take a step back, quantify the number of hours lost, what those lost hours are actually costing the company, not just in terms of the employee's hourly salary, but also in terms of lost productivity, how it may be impacting the customer experience, and then just make a really compelling financial case of why using those keys isn't such a good idea.
Okay, great. Here's a short question from Mark. Should we just give up and go thin client for everyone?
That's certainly an option. I don't think thin client is an ideal solution for every organization because certainly there are budgetary considerations to take into account, but you also have to consider that if people are working from home, not everybody has the bandwidth available or the bandwidth that's required for thin client. But certainly in a lot of organizations, thin client is a good option. Microsoft just recently released Microsoft 365, Microsoft 365, that's not right, Windows 365, which allows you to run cloud PCs that run Windows and have those hosted. And that's fairly easy to set up if you go with the business option. The enterprise option takes a bit of infrastructure and is a lot harder to deploy, but that's certainly one way of getting around some of these issues.
Okay. And before we get to the next question, I'd like to remind the audience that we can take questions up until about 5 minutes to the top of the hour in order to give you a short break before the next session. So please send them on in. And let's go to the Q&A box. Here's a new one that just popped in from Richie. Is it possible to have Office 365 rewrite the web links but not show it to the user so they can see the real link?
Yeah, there actually is a URL rewriting feature that's built into Microsoft 365.
Okay, easy one there. Here's an observation from Philip when you were talking about split tunneling. Philip says, I suggest that split tunneling is probably bad security advice. If you have an alternative path for something, you may both be introducing a backdoor/pivot opportunity for attackers. It also introduces a blind spot for networks that are not choked through the security-controlled VPN device. What do you have to say about that observation?
Well, when you start talking about security, you have to remember that any security mechanism, no matter what it is, has pros and cons. Just to give an easy example, I talked about the uniform way that the blackjack tables in Las Vegas do things. those same patterns that provide good security also make you absolutely predictable. So that's kind of a downside to it. So with any security mechanism, there are advantages and disadvantages, and you have to look at those carefully and just consider if the potential disadvantages outweigh the advantages and what's really right for your own organization. There's no magical answer that's going to be 100% relevant to everybody.
Okay, next question is one of the longer questions I've ever seen.
Oh, dear.
And if you want to follow along, if you want to read along, it's from Alan in the Q&A box, and I will read the question. If I lock down all login devices to a specific biometric device, including laptops, servers, desktops, cloud, and website, is there a way to globally refresh all my keys when a biometric device is stolen or lost? If I lost access, but I reverted back to MFA or something like Azure, but I will need a way to revert back all accounts globally with the same security policy. Would it make sense in the zero trust methodology to have a backup biometric device that gives same access as primary biometric device, but had different security keys?
I would say absolutely it would make sense to do that. You never ever want to put yourself in a situation where you've got a single point of failure that can cause that type of massive disruption. So having a secondary biometric device that's fully provisioned and ready to go but kept somewhere secure where it won't be compromised but can be called upon when needed would be an exceptionally good idea if you're going to go that route.
Okay. Here's a question from Mark. He put this in when you were talking about conditional access parameters. Mark asked, can you give some examples of these conditional access parameters? What are the conditions typically set other than time?
Oh, there are so many of them that you could set. Geographic location is a really big one. If, for example, you've got a small organization and you know that everybody lives in the same country where you're hosting your data center, then you can say anybody trying to access from outside of the country should be denied. That's one example. Another thing that you can look at is behavior patterns, and that actually takes, I believe, an Azure AD Premium P2 license. You don't get that with the basic conditional access policies. But you can set up Azure so that it looks for abnormal behavior patterns, and you can set up a conditional access policy to deny access to a resource if a user is doing something that Azure perceives to be abnormal or really risky. You can base conditional access policies on device types. Maybe you want to allow access to Windows devices but not iOS devices. I'm just throwing an example out there. The conditional access policies, are super flexible. There are a huge number of conditions that you can base that on. As far as what's typically done, I would recommend going out to the Microsoft documentation for conditional access policies because they've got a great big long section on the policies that they recommend creating. Now, a couple of those policies are a little out in left field, but most of them are pretty on track. And they not only tell you what policies they recommend creating and why, but they even show you how to do it. So that's definitely something that's worth your time to look at.
Okay, and it just so happens we have another question in the Q&A box about conditional access policies, which you might have just addressed. The question reads, what do I need to do to start building conditional access policy?
Well, the big thing that you need is an Azure AD Premium P1 subscription. Once you've got that, then you've got everything that you need to get started. Now, depending on the type of policies that you're going to be creating, there might be some additional licenses that you need. As I mentioned a moment ago, there are some policy types that require an Azure Premium P2 license, or Azure AD Premium P2 rather. Also, there are some conditional access policies that require an Intune license. But just for the basics, all you need is that Azure AD Premium P1 subscription. Hello?
Okay, looks like we have time for one more question. And the question reads, can you clarify why you said that all endpoint devices should be regarded as untrusted?
Sure. Today, with so many users working remotely, users are largely working from personal devices, which are untrustworthy by their very definition. But you may also have corporate-issued domain-joined laptops or desktops that users are working from. From a security perspective, it's a whole lot easier and a lot safer not to differentiate between the two. Rather than saying, okay, these devices are trusted, these aren't, just treat everything as untrusted. That way you've got one set of policies, you can help keep things simpler, and it's easier to manage that way. And it also tends to be more secure because if somebody does mess up and they do something on a device that's regarded as trustworthy that ends up undermining that device's security, if you're treating that device as untrustworthy, then that mess up isn't going to matter quite as much.
Okay, well, it looks like that's all the questions we have time for. Thanks again, Brian, for a great presentation and answering those questions.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone else, stay tuned. We're going to take a short break and be back at the top of the hour for our third session, Hottest Third-Party Products, and the giveaway of our Surface Pro 8, for which you must be present to win. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to our third session. Becky, please take it away.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate you. A few things. Oh, I'm Becky Nagel, by the way. I'm the Vice President of Web here. And we're thrilled to have you with us with these summit series. We love doing them. We love having you with us. So thank you for joining us. If it's your first time, if you're joining us once again, thank you for coming back. We hope you're finding it useful and informative. And these are such great sessions, these third sessions. You're going to get insight into some really hot products that are out on the market right now that can help you do your job better, more cost effectively, and it's some great stuff. So we really hope you enjoy it. Some housekeeping stuff before we get started. Number one, you will get an email with the entire summit on replay, so you can rewatch it. You're going to get that within 24 to 72 hours, so you should get that. It's going to email. Here it is. It might say, hey, in case you missed it, you didn't miss it, but because you're here, but you will get that. Two, we may go over a little bit over. It's probably going to last a little bit over an hour today. Please stay with us, though. We want you to stay to the end. Not only, number one, you do have to be here. We're going to do that drawing for the Surface Pro 8 at the end. You do have to be on live to be entered into the drawing. You don't have to do anything. It's a random number generator, and it goes through. We look at the number of the people on the call, and it random number generates, and we pick the number of the person. So all you have to do is be on the call, but you do have to be here when we do that. So be sure to stay on the call, but also because of that, at the very end, we do a survey. We ask your opinions, and we use that feedback to do these. The editors work really hard to make these events happen, to bring you the best speakers, to bring you information. And we want to know what you think. We want your honest opinion. So please take that survey. Let us know what you think. And that we're going to take that information and do more and more summits for you. And speaking of doing future summits, we really, really want to thank Call Tower, Okta, Smart Deploy, and Red Hat. Without them underwriting this content, we cannot do these summits. They're underwriting it. They're supporting the community by sponsoring these summits. So thank you. Thank you for sponsoring this event today. We cannot tell you how much we appreciate it. If you guys could please show your support by downloading those resources that are available right now in the console. You guys can go sign up for a demo, check out their website, do whatever you can do. Let them know that you appreciate their supporting the community, supporting these events, and you'd like to see more of them. We appreciate that. So again, thank you, Call Tower, Okta, Smart Deploy, and Red Hat. Now, I'm thrilled to announce to you our first speaker. He's William Rubio. He's the Chief Revenue Officer at Call Tower. And William, take it away.
Well, great, Becky. Thank you very much for that introduction. And again, appreciate to be part of just such a great summit with some of the other partners here that could really provide some key platforms to a lot of customers that are out there. And let's really dive in. I think today it's pretty excited about what we have out there with Call Tower and Microsoft Teams. And I think it's really important when we start off to really talk a little bit about what we're seeing with Microsoft Teams today. There's been really a substantial explosion because of the pandemic, and obviously even prior to the pandemic, of Microsoft Teams is really kind of a collaboration hub that a lot of organizations are looking at. And some of the numbers that we're seeing are just incredible, really unheard of in our industry overall. When you look at having about 250 million active Teams users. So 250 million people are actually using this on a monthly basis overall. On the actual daily active users on mobile devices is somewhere around 70 million. There's about 80 million people that are actually using voice with Microsoft Teams. There was about 900 or so apps in February of 2021 that was added into Microsoft Teams overall. So when you start to look at these statistics overall, you can see that this is really becoming a major differentiator in the industry overall. The way that we actually are communicating, not just with voice, but when we're talking about different things like instant messaging, video, conferencing, et cetera, really makes a big difference. And what's one of the main reasons why we're seeing that is because of what it's really bringing in the collaboration table, right? So when you start to look at the reduction of meetings, the reduction of emails overall, the productivity improvement, right? Because all of a sudden I have to reduce the amount of meetings that I'm in because I'm collaborating with my team, whether they're across the street or whether they're across the world. It just makes it a lot easier to communicate back and forth. And then it's going to lower your cost overall and help increase that revenue. It's really just been a transformation overall that we're seeing in the marketplace. Now, with that, obviously, there comes some confusion and some education that has to be done. And this is where an organization like Call Tower really comes in to really kind of add that value, right? I mean, technology overall continues to change on a daily basis, and Microsoft Teams is being a wonderful solution to basically kind of start as your foundation. There's a lot more that goes into it overall. And with Call Tower, it's about, yes, providing that Microsoft Teams interface as that key main component, whether you're getting your Office 365 license through Call Tower or another partner or Microsoft Direct. That isn't as important as the rest of it that's actually being provided by Call Tower. When you're looking at different things like CCAS, text messaging, the porting of the telephone numbers, making sure that we're filling in those gaps, call recording and so forth, that are all part of the key parts that a lot of customers need to make sure that they can look at adding voice into a Microsoft Teams solution. So you want to make sure that you're partnering up with the right organization to go ahead and do that. And with Call Tower, you're dealing with somebody that's been a Microsoft Gold partner going back about 13 plus years, right? Somebody that has been what they call a cloud service provider since 2014, so about 7+ years overall. We were the first to actually do voice with Microsoft Teams. It's referred to really as direct routing since November of 2018, so coming up actually now on our 3-year anniversary. And as much as that doesn't sound like a long time, in the Microsoft Teams ecosystem, we're pretty much the pioneers overall as far as launching voice. And it really goes back to those 13+ years that we've been really enabling voice, whether it's Microsoft Lync or Microsoft Skype for Business or now Microsoft Teams, that we're able to go ahead and provide that going back to all those years overall. We're also one of the biggest growth partners for Microsoft overall the past 5 years running, so very honored about that. And we just recently launched our Operator Connect. We're going to go into that here in a few minutes as well, back in September, so pretty excited about that. But when you start to look at all the stuff here in Microsoft, you also got to start to look at the Metaswitch. So Metaswitch, if you guys are unfamiliar with it, is a UCaaS platform that was acquired by Microsoft in May of 2020, so about a year and a half ago overall. But what it really does is it kind of fills in the gaps on some of the limitations that the Microsoft Teams offering has. And that's really key, is that when you're dealing with somebody like Call Tower, we're delivering a full end-to-end solution to you. Instead of just giving you Microsoft Teams and voice on Teams, we're really making sure that we include different things like business continuity, disaster recovery, and at the same time like CRM integration, contact center, texting, et cetera, some of those features that we'll talk about here in a few minutes as well. So when you're looking at Call Tower, we are what is called a native Microsoft Teams direct routing partner. So when you're talking about native, there's a lot of different ways to connect into Microsoft Teams. But the way that Call Tower does it is we actually connect directly into the Azure cloud and leverage that Office 365 infrastructure that you already have. There's no third-party PBX or UCaaS platform that we're using there to provide you those core features. And that's really important for customers to really understand the difference between one and the other. And we're going to jump into that here in a minute too, as far as what it actually means to be native overall. But when you start to looking at Microsoft Teams, and one of the major things that customers ask us all the time is, well, why Call Tower? Why should I go to Call Tower for voice on Microsoft Teams when I could go to Microsoft or I could go to some other providers that are out there? And there's a host of reasons for that. These are just some of the highlighted ones here. But when you're looking at global reach, right, we're over 100+ countries that we can provide services to overall. We could also fill in those gaps with our hosted UCaaS solution with Metaswitch on different things that just the Teams interface won't provide. You're dealing with somebody that has experience on the Microsoft ecosystem going back 13+ years overall, somebody that is an expert in porting your telephone numbers, your VIDs over into a Microsoft Teams solution, including even a hybrid solution if it's needed. somebody that you know that at the end of the day, if you want to pick up the phone or you want to IM them or you want to email them, you're going to get somebody on the other side with 24/7 support. And let's not forget live training. I think the training part of it to make sure that you're getting that buy-in from your employees in your organization are very critical to the success of any organization when they are looking at actually moving and transitioning into a different platform. And then guess what? There's really no equipment that's needed on site because we do everything in the private cloud environment with Microsoft directly. So you're kind of getting a good education overall by working and partnering with somebody like Call Tower to make sure that we could deliver and really adapt the right Microsoft Teams solution for you and your organization. And here's just some of the roadmap that we've had over the past 2.5 years. We don't even go back into 2018 because it's too far to put here in one slide. But you can see that we listen to our customers. We understand what the demands are out there on our roadmap, and we continue to add services and features to our initial core Microsoft Teams offering to make sure that we're hearing our customers and providing the needs and requirements that they have. We're getting ready to launch right now in this quarter our emergency mass notification system. So whether it is that you have, let's say, somebody using the emergency systems for a first respondent, you can make sure to communicate through Microsoft Teams on that, whether it's domestic or international on that. We're going to talk to you about Operator Connect in a few minutes as well as far as what that means. But we also have different things like call compliance, call recording, so that everything stays within your Office 365 environment. Security is something that obviously is very big. We all know the DDoS attacks that are going out there on a daily basis, so that's critical to your infrastructure to make sure that you guys are there. So again, we continue to make sure to enhance our services to really help our customers and make sure that it's something that as much as we can build into it to continue to go deeper into the stack, it's a lot more seamless of an end user experience for our customers. And again, I can't really stress how important it is to make sure that you have a company that can reach your employees on a global platform overall, right? So when you look at Microsoft, they tout that they're in about 36 countries that they can provide voice directly themselves. We're in 100 countries and over 6,000 cities. So some of those more challenging areas, whether it's in the APAC region or LATAM or even in the EMEA regions, we're able to go ahead and provide those services to you. And the important thing is to make sure that your employee experience, your end user experience is going to be the same, whether they're in the U.S. or North America or over in Australia or over in the UK or over in Northern Europe. It's going to have that same experience overall. So going back and talking a little bit about that native solution that we were talking about, there's a couple different ways that Microsoft Teams can be deployed overall. And when you start to look at the different voice designs that are out there, again, you could get it from Microsoft or you could get it native from us. Now, if you look here on Design 3 and Design 4, there's other folks that kind of tout other providers that say that they integrate with Microsoft Teams, but here's really kind of the main thing. If they're telling you to go to a different portal to access a different interface, to make changes to simple things like your auto attendant, your voicemails, your hunt groups, or your call queues as they're called nowadays, then it's not native. That means that they have some type of interface that is basically integrating between your environment and Microsoft, and that just leads to risk, and that just leads to uncertainty overall. And this is kind of the way it looks like. When you're looking at the top part of this diagram, that's the way it looks with Call Tower. The bottom part of it is when you're looking at a third party that, again, adds another layer of risk, adds another layer of issues that could happen from a security standpoint, and just really need to go ahead and be careful on that overall. So something new that just came out now in September, there was a big launch by Microsoft called Operator Connect. Overall, we were excited that we were actually invited with a handful of global providers to actually be invited into Operator Connect. And Operator Connect and Direct Routing are pretty similar. The difference is that now, if you're looking to add voice on your Microsoft Teams interface, you could actually go as an administrator into your Office 365 portal, and there is a portion or a tab, if you want to call it, in there for operators, which could enable voice within your Microsoft Teams experience. And Call Tower is one of the providers that you can actually select. So there was a stringent list or compliance issues that you have to go through to make sure that you are certified by Microsoft to be on this list. We were honored that we were one of the ones invited and were able to meet the compliance regulations on it overall. So again, very excited to be there. And it doesn't really change the feature set from Direct Routing to Operator Connect. It's really just the way that we're connecting the end users to enable the voice within the Microsoft Teams experience. That's really what it comes down to. You can see here from this image, it's a very simple interface, just like you would go and you would want to add Visio as another product to one of your employees. It's basically kind of the same steps to add voice for that user overall. And then just to kind of wrap up here a little bit, because I know we're going to be short for time overall, when you start to look at some of the things that we do on Operator Connect and the advantages, is you want to make sure that you're working with somebody that can provide you that full turnkey solution. I think that that's very important to explain that you don't want to go out there and have to manage 3 or 4 different vendors to really make sure to give you an end-to-end solution. Let Call Tower, as somebody that has that experience within the Teams environment, go ahead and provide you that full end-to-end solution and support, which I think is very important to do together. And different things like E911, not just in North America, here in the U.S. and Canada, but also globally, wherever emergency services are needed. We talked about that call recording overall. And then all of this works with our Call Tower Connect administrative portal to really make sure that you can make those moves, adds, or changes when needed as well, very seamlessly. And again, also making sure that you have somebody that can support you 24/7 overall. Last thing I want to go ahead and bring up is kind of a system within a system. Is we do also work, and again, this is just because of our partnership with Microsoft, to be the exclusive provider within GCC High. And what that means is that when you have voice users, everything kind of sits here on the left-hand side of this diagram where it says Office 365. But on the right, there are Department of Defense contractors that, because they are working with the Department of Defense, they have to be in a different cloud and Azure government. And Call Tower is the exclusive provider for voice on Microsoft to provide the solution to government contractors. Microsoft, because of compliance reasons, can't even themselves. So they asked us a few years ago to actually get in there and start testing them, and we've done that overall. So we work with a lot of defense contractors. Doesn't necessarily have to be enterprise customers. We do work with some small and medium businesses that they might be providing a certain niche to the Department of Defense. And again, they need to be in Microsoft Teams in this private cloud environment with Azure Government. And when they want to enable voice in Microsoft Teams, and Call Tower is the right solution for them, and we could actually provide it. So different things like CMMC and ITAR and NICS 180 and so forth are some of the compliance regulations that we have enabled for our customers overall. And last but not least here, before I hand it back over to Becky for some good Q&A, it's really about that Call Tower advantage overall. So for us, again, it's really about not a specific product, but making sure that we can integrate our UCaaS, our CCaaS solution for contact center, the conferencing and collaboration, the network optimization, all under one roof, and make sure that you're working with somebody that can really bring you that full end-to-end solution overall. So with that, Becky, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over back to you, and I look forward to some of the Q&A.
Thank you, William. Great presentation, and we do have questions, not surprisingly. I think, as you know, you guys are right at the crux of what a lot of our readers are dealing with, having to get these solutions and get them done, quickly and correctly and get it done right away. So I'm sure you guys are dealing with a lot of what our real readers are struggling with right now. Let's get some of these questions in. What's the difference between a native MS Team voice deployment and a non-native when it comes to the customer experience?
So what happens when it's not native? In some cases, the employee or the actual administrator has to log into a different portal to make changes to the system, or to access voicemail, or to reset a PIN number, which are just some of the things that, why do I need to log in somewhere else? I should be able to log into my Office 365 portal and pretty much manage the entire solution from that one portal. And when a competitor comes out and says that they can integrate with Microsoft Teams, but go to my portal to make a simple change like on an auto attendant, then you know it's not native, and they're not leveraging the entire Microsoft platform because they're using a third party to basically provide that connection. So there's kind of a platform in between connecting the end user to Microsoft Teams. And again, that just adds to some risk, some uncertainty, security issues, another layer of disaster that could actually happen or interruption of services. So you want to make sure when you start looking under the hood is ask those questions. Well, if I want to change my voicemail or access my voicemail or change my auto attendant, where am I doing that? If they tell you anywhere outside of Office 365, then it's not a native Office 365 Microsoft Teams solution.
Okay. And just a reminder, guys, get questions in. We don't have time to ask them to William. We'll forward them to him, and he'll answer them directly to you. So another question. With a multi-location business headquartered in the U.S. and with offices in the U.K. and Australia, can Call Tower's Team solution handle calls locally?
Yes, that's actually a big part of our solution overall. So we have multiple points of presence internationally over in Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, the UK, Germany. So these actually act as regional hubs for us. And we have a customer, let's just say as that example, in the UK, US, and Australia. They could all communicate with each other through Microsoft Teams. And whenever it is that they're picking up the phone or using their Microsoft Teams app to actually place a local call, that call stays within country or within a region. So that UK caller is calling down the street to order food, as an example, that call is not coming to the U.S. and then going back to the U.K. It's actually staying within the U.K. Same thing goes for Australia or any other countries that we provide services.
Here is a good reader question that came in. Do I need a specific MS license to integrate Call Tower?
No. So the nice thing about Microsoft Teams is that you can't go out and buy Microsoft Teams directly. Microsoft Teams comes as part of a package. Usually it becomes part of a package of like an E1 or an E3 or an E5 licensing that you buy through Microsoft, which gives you your email, your Outlook calendar, and so forth. So your Microsoft Office products like Microsoft Word and Excel. So you basically buy that package. Now, you could buy that through Call Tower. So we do provide it as a cloud service provider for Microsoft. You're going to pay the same price you would pay directly to Microsoft, so you're not going to pay anything more. But what you're going to get is you're going to get the experience on the back end of somebody that can provide you that 24/7 support and then add on the voice component of it so that now Microsoft Teams becomes your entire communication hub for your solution. So if I want to dial somebody and call somebody internally or externally, I'm just doing it with a click of a button. I could still use my handset. So we are a Poly and a Yearlink phone device distributor as well that we could add into the solution for Microsoft Teams. But you basically, as long as you have that license, whether it's through Call Tower or Microsoft, we could enable the voice. We could port over your existing telephone numbers, or we could provide you new ones in all those 100 countries as well, and really make sure to drive that end-to-end solution.
Great. And so, William, I know one thing our readers are going to want to know, how do they find out more about your solutions? What's the best way to go about it? What do you recommend?
Sure. Well, the best thing is that they could go to our website. It's just calltower.com. We have a lot of great information there about our Microsoft Teams voice deployment. You could also reach us by sending us an email over to sales@calltower.com. Our marketing team does a great job of making sure they're responding back and put you in touch with the right consultant on the Call Tower staff to make sure that we can drive that right solution. But again, I would definitely advise everybody just go to calltower.com. It's a very good and informative website as far as the different options and how we really tie in all of these different product sets and let us really make sure that we can drive that solution for you to make sure that you can worry about the growth of your business and we can worry about providing that communication for you overall.
And finally, because you see this day in and day out, do you have any parting advice?
Yeah, I think the biggest parting advice, Becky, is that you want to make sure that when you are going to be doing such a transformation overall for any type of platform like this, I mean, this is obviously very critical to success of any business, right? It's the way that you communicate internally, the way you communicate with your customers, the way that you communicate with your vendors, right, and everything far few in between, your depository for all of your files and so forth. So I think it's very important that when you are looking at doing this transition, Number one is that you're working with an organization like Call Tower that can bring that experience on how to make sure to get buy-in, not just from the IT organization, but pretty much from across the business units within your organization, and really understand and adapt the solution overall that's critical to make sure that you succeed in your business. Because you don't want the 80-20 rule, right? You don't want to have 20% of the people only using 80% of the features. You want it the other way around. You want 80% of the people using all the features and leveraging it and not doing any type of shadow IT. So I think it's really important to align yourself with somebody that understands and that can give you that education and really make sure to drive a solution.
Hello, I think we just lost I'm sorry, we had an audio problem on our end and we lost William there, but thank you so much, William, for being with us. We really appreciate it. Again, you're going to get a replay of this, so thank you so much. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to go on to our next speaker. That is Kelsey Nelson. He's the Group Managing Product Marketing Director at Okta. Kelsey, please take it away.
Alrighty, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to chat a little bit about securing a remote workforce. So to dive right in, really what we're hearing from IT and security leaders is how do I balance this idea of enabling these new ways of working and continuing to deliver on that productivity while managing this continuing security need of a distributed remote workforce. And what we find is that as we start to think through that security challenge, really a lot of what it comes down to is the traditional perimeter, network-oriented perimeter doesn't really exist, right? We have more people accessing more resources for more devices and locations than ever before, which means we have to think about and shift our mindset away from those traditional approaches to security. And a lot of that comes down to ensuring that those users have the right level of access and we're securing that access to all of those different resources. So when we start to think about how to actually put those things into place, we sort of sequenced it out based on what we're hearing from IT and security leaders on going through that challenge of really protecting that user access. So from left to right, really where we saw many organizations prior to the pandemic was that they had some sort of traditional work environment. Maybe they had some on-prem directory like AD, LDAP. They were starting to adopt cloud applications, so things weren't necessarily integrated, and there was maybe no or limited remote work capabilities. Fast forward to last spring, and what we saw from most businesses was the need to really enable secure remote working fast. And that looked like potentially expanding VPN capacity. It looked like adding MFA to VPN or any new collaboration tools that were rolled out to enable productivity during that time. And after that firefighting phase, though, is really where we saw organizations and where we see businesses today is how do I start to enhance productivity and really put those pieces into place, knowing that I might want to or need to enable, at least for the near term, some sort of distributed workforce. And I think what we hear, too, as we start to think through this challenge, a lot of that ties back to a zero trust approach to security. And so how can we be putting the right foundations into place now that set us up for that modern security approach in the future? Now, there's a lot here, I think, as organizations are really starting to grapple with and moving through that stage 2 and those stage 3 projects. We're not going to be able to cover everything in this short session, but what I will touch on briefly is a few of those foundational components, like how can you start to approach automating on and offboarding. So certainly a productivity piece, ensuring users are up and running from day one, but also security, right? We want to make sure they have the right access to the right resources and that we're able to automate removing that access if that user changes roles or leaves the organization. And we'll also touch on some of those context-based access policies. So how can you think about access controls when you don't have the traditional work environment? And we'll touch briefly on how that can tie together for a better user experience. So there's my quick summary. I beat my own slides, but we'll start with that automation, right people, then the context, and then of course making it easier for our end users. I would be remiss, and why am I talking about this if I didn't at least mention, so I'm coming from Okta here, so if you're not familiar, Okta's mission is to enable any organization to use any technology, right? We're in the business of identity management. And so what we mean by this, and when we talk about identity and access management, we talk about it in sort of two flavors. On the right is that computer screen, which is what most folks know us for, which is our workforce identity. So a worker would sign in, they would get access to all of the resources that they need to do their jobs, and that's really where we'll be focused today. We do also, though, have a customer identity platform, which enables you to take those same foundational building blocks of authentication, user store authorization, and put them in the hands of developers as they're building their own customer-facing experiences. So we're going to stick on the workforce side for today and talk through these. So starting off with the right people, the right access from day one. So when we talk about onboarding and offboarding, this is a process that has been very difficult to scale, right? When you start to think about all of the users that need to access all of these different resources and making sure that we have the right resources assigned to the right users from day one, that's a pretty high touch process. And because it's often something that's been done manually, that tends to result in often errors, which tend to correlate with those manual processes. And that gets extremely challenging as your business starts to scale, right? And so the challenge and the burden ends up falling on those IT organizations, as well as the end users who may struggle to get access to the right tools from that first day. And why is that? Now, a part of it is again, that manual piece, but also it's disconnected and unsynchronized across all of those different resources. So if you think about a typical onboarding flow where the user may join the HR team, needs to somehow denote to the IT team, maybe it's through a ticket, it's through email, they send a chat message that this person has joined, and then IT needs to set up access to each and every one of the resources that's appropriate for that person's role. Where we'd like to move to is that we can automate this across a master source. So if you do have an end user joining, maybe if the HR team is putting them into their HR system, can we start to automate it from that first step where the user's created in HR and then move them into and automate access across all of these different resources? And so in doing so, we're able to start to remove some of that manual workload, and it's also keeping that synchronized across every single one of these resources. And ideally, also then if a user were to change or we have some sort of life cycle update within the HR system, we can automate then those changes and all of those downstream apps as well. Now, I can't go into too much depth again, given time, but just to call out, there are a lot of ways you can tackle this. There are some protocols, something like SCIM, that can help you start to automate that from the HR system through something like an identity provider into those downstream apps. We do also have a relatively new solution that makes this really easy to really go into depth with those automated on and offboarding. So certainly being able to not only make sure that that user has access, but that maybe we're assigning them the right territory in something like a Salesforce, or setting them up in the right box folders, or sending them a Slack message in the right channels to welcome them to their new team. So being able to do that rich on and offboarding that can not only take that burden off of your IT teams and also help to close some of those security gaps, but really make that day one experience great for your end users. Now, moving quickly, I know, but the next piece I wanted to chat through was sort of that idea of how can we use context to mitigate risk. And so this really, again, I know it ties back to that idea of zero trust, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean zero trust. We want to make sure that our users and our workers are trusted in accessing the tools that they need, but it does mean we do need to rethink some of those traditional approaches to protecting a business, right? So again, I mentioned that at the top of this, we need to move away from that traditional castle and moat style and really start to enable those strong access controls, knowing who the user is and making sure that it is them before they access a specific resource. So we start to think through this. It really starts with that foundation of ensuring that the user and the device, like what do we know about those two pieces of information, and then combining that with those rich contextual signals. So it could be something, again, we just talked through the user's role, so making sure that they've been assigned the right resources, but what else do I know about that user? Are they a developer? Are they an individual contributor versus a team lead? What resource are they trying to access? And I then need to pair that and compare that with contextual signals from across my security stack. So bringing in, and we particularly have seen a lot of focus on contextual signals from things like the device? What do I know about the device posture, or if the device is managed, has been really key in this distributed work environment. And being able to combine those things to set policies before allowing access into a specific resource. So potentially I only want to allow, maybe I want to set granular policies to only allow access into sensitive applications when when the user's on a managed device. Or I just want to say if something is in general anomalous from what I usually detect from my user, then if something is anomalous, then I'll go ahead and prompt for a second factor. So using those different contextual signals, certainly from within the identity provider, but also from across your security stack, will really help give you a more holistic picture of risk before you allow access, which one, makes sure that we're increasing security, but two, also allows you to give more easy and seamless experiences when risk is low. And then lastly, of course, we want to make sure that if we do detect something anomalous from one of these contextual signals, that we're also feeding that into our SIMs and our SOARs so we can start to take action on it if we do see something is amiss. I did want to call out too, we've got a great partnership coalition that we announced a few months ago that really focuses on how can we start to tie together these different solutions. So from endpoint, someone like a CrowdStrike, with the resource itself, with Netskope, and then of course Proofpoint from an email and people-oriented security standpoint, which allows us to really tightly integrate just one example of how to approach that modern security stack. And then lastly, I mentioned this, we want to make sure that as we're thinking through the ability to automate provisioning and make sure that it's certainly enhancing security, but also improving our end users' experience. And again, with mitigating risk and bringing those contextual signals, if we know risk is low, let's make it easier for our end users to do their work. Because if we don't, and I think historically we've seen, and yes, this little GIF always gets me, the security hasn't always been in the driver's seat, right? We've seen that our end users have a tendency to try to circumvent those controls if we don't put those, be thoughtful about the protections and making sure that it's balancing ease of use. And so when you think about the ability to make things easier for your end user and really use security and risk to make things not only improve security, but make things easier, you'll start to see that your users are coming to you and saying, hey, I would like to add this into that same secure system, which in turn gives you more visibility over everything in your enterprise. So as you're starting to think through, just another way to approach this is ensuring that you have sort of a centralized point to bring together certainly all of your cloud applications, but think about extending this to on-prem as well and being able to utilize these resources across all types of devices so that, again, we're really making things better and easier for our end users while protecting your organization. So with that, that was my very brief overview of sort of this next phase of distributed work and how you can think about protecting your business. And really what it comes down to for today's challenge is where to get started. So be it starting more on those automation projects or looking at ways you can better set contextual policies for access controls. Always happy to help. We have a lot more resources on all of these things, but feel free to reach out if you have questions. And thank you so much for the time. All right, and it looks like we had a couple of questions come in, and so I'll just run through those quickly. So one of them asks, what HR systems does Okta connect to? Yeah, great question. So Okta has a number of integrations for that HR-driven provisioning. So Workday is absolutely one. We do have other integrations with vendors like Bamboo, namely SuccessFactors and UltiPro. And I think there's a full list on Okta.com if you have others that you want to take a peek at. Someone else asked about other popular context policies for remote work. So I think what we've seen and what we've heard sort of anecdotally has been a lot around how can I start to really elevate, I think, device posture and device, whether or not the device is managed, have been really some of the big ones we've heard questions about recently. And I think in the Zero Trust survey that we ran earlier this year that we saw a shift in even prior to COVID. So I'll call those out. We do also see lots of certainly we have a recent integration, somewhat recent integration with Proofpoint from an email security. That one's been, Proofpoint can see the most targeted users in your organization, so you can set policies against that very attacked person or VAP list. And then the last one here is asking about, do you integrate with any other endpoint vendors? And I'm guessing this is referring to, I called that slide out about the Spectra Alliance, which has an integration and talks about our partnership with CrowdStrike. And so we absolutely do integrate with other endpoint vendors. So a few other examples, folks like Jamf, MobileIron, VMware, Carbon Black, are a few other examples. So if you do have more questions, again, Okta.com, the Okta Integration Network should give you the full list of who we integrate with. And with that, I will say thank you very much. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Thanks so much, Kelsey. We appreciate it. And if you have questions, again, you can reach out or you can go ahead and put them in the console and we'll get them over to Kelsey. So up next, we wanted to, sorry, 1 second. Okay, here I am in my script. Sorry about that, guys. Right now we're on to our next speaker. It's Austin Delaney. He's the Technical Pre-Sales Manager at Smart Deploy. Austin, please take it away.
Hello and welcome to today's presentation from Smart Deploy about modern endpoint management for a hybrid workforce. So my name is Austin Delaney. I'm a pre-sales technical manager over here at Smart Deploy. And so what me and my team do is we help people who are evaluating the software get through a successful trial, whether that be questions or demos or anything between. That is what we are here to do and here for you. So today what we're going to be doing is going through a PowerPoint about who we are as a company, a little bit about us, how to get started with Smart Deploy, and then go into several scenarios about application deployment, imaging, user data, and driver management, both on our local network and also remotely via our cloud feature. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive in here. So we are Smart Deploy. We're located in Bellevue, Washington. We've been in the Seattle area for about 10 years now, actually a little more since 2009. And throughout that time, we've always been focused on providing a easy-to-use solution that is focused on IT Pro. So that means something that you can dive in and use, and it's UI-based, without a lot of configuration or training necessary to get started. So that's what we've always been focused on this whole time. And since then, our customer base has grown quite substantially, up to a little over 3,000 customers globally now, with a lot of those being in schools and education. So it just really fits into that kind of multiple different types of device, different environments, those kind of those hybrid scenarios that we're talking about here today. So in terms of the product itself and where we fit into the marketplace, Smart Deploy, like I said, has always been really focused on being easy to use. But as time goes on, we've also been adding more and more features. Now we have a suite of features, as I mentioned, things like imaging, app, drivers, remote, and local. So we put all those things together into an easy-to-use solution that we really think is a nice cross-section of what people are looking for here today. So that's where we find ourselves, and that's what we're striving to do even more of. I think that's what you'll find, too, as you go through and look through Smart Deploy. In terms of getting the solution started and sliding slightly more to the technical side, we'll start off with an IT workstation. Really any machine that you may have in your environment. Certainly does not have to be anything super powerful. Go ahead and install the console onto that machine, and then you can immediately dive in and get started. We provide application packs, driver packs, all ready to go. You can just download right through the solution. You can also create your own Windows image using the Capture Wizard and a virtualization software as well. So those are all things you can do through the console in addition to managing those remote machines as well. Once you have some of those component pieces built out, you will then have a library that can be, either small or can have a lot of different things in it. And that library can then be used for your different deployment scenarios. So with that said, it would look a little bit like this. You have different images, different application packs, different drivers that you may have created or downloaded onto a given machine, and then you have the ability to choose your deployment media options, whether that's something like a classic USB or a Pixie package, or if you want to do our remote options, you have the same kind of deployment pieces that you can put into these different scenarios. Once you've decided on a different media type, go ahead and create that through the console, and then you can immediately apply it to one or several machines very easily. In terms of getting started, we really believe this can be done in an afternoon, a couple hours. Download and install the console onto a machine of your choice. As I mentioned, you want to install our client onto a test machine or a set of test machines, once again, you can then download application packs or drivers that are pre-created. Again, these are made so that you can immediately just start pushing them out to machines. And then lastly, once you have a feel for the console, we'd recommend creating a golden image from a virtual machine. In a very high level, this is meant to be a use case-based image, so something that is going to be for, say, a sales team or engineering team or teachers, something like that, a big broad group you can then use the same image for. So with that said, we're going to move over to the console itself, and this is what this is going to look like, is this different pool of resources that you have through the console here. The first thing that we're going to do is head over to computer management, which is really your center for managing those machines. Again, if they're on the local network or on the remote network, they're all going to be through here. If you hit all computers, you'll be presented with a list of all the different machines that are communicating back with the central console. Now, the client is what facilitates this. So once the client is installed, it will either connect locally or it will connect via the cloud. It picks the correct one automatically based on where the machine is. And let's say you have somebody who was in the office but went home, or conversely, they were at home and brought their laptop into the office, the connection type will change automatically. So it's kind of designed from the ground up to be used in these hybrid environments. If you wanted to search for a machine, you can simply type in the name of the machine there and pop up. And then once you have a machine you've decided on, you can go through this right-hand ribbon and choose one of these actions. Now, the first scenario I'll go through for you is about a remote imaging option. So somebody, let's say, is at their house and they need to be completely updated from either maybe they have an issue with their machine or they need to be updated to a later version of Windows. You can select deploy image, and because they're remote, we'll choose the cloud option. You'll then choose an image that you want, say this new Windows 11 image here, and then hit deploy. And once you've done that, that process will immediately kick off and head towards the remote machine. So for that user who's sitting on the machine, there's really nothing that they need to do. There's not going to be any prompts that are required or information they need. It'll simply begin the process in a few moments and then begin restarting. That's how you know the process has really kicked off in earnest. When the machine comes back up, it will be in a Windows PE environment. This is our Smart PE environment, and from here on out is where the process is going to begin wiping the machine, applying that new image and driver. So the first thing you'll see is the ability to cancel it. So for instance, if you need to change your mind, but beyond that, it will begin the process of downloading an image from your own cloud storage. It gets cut up into pieces to make that process work a little better. That's why you'll see those different image parts there. So it begins downloading the image, gives you a little progress bar on how that's going, and then it will combine them all into one image and validate, make sure that it's a healthy, secure image there. After which it will do a disk part clean in a quick format to wipe the drive and apply the new image to disk. It'll also do the drivers, make sure that the machine is fully ready to go, and then it'll reboot into the actual Windows drive itself. So the first thing you'll see is the process of running sysprep. As you may know, sysprep scrambles the SID, but also does things like the region, the product key, the domain, and all those pieces of information that you would normally need to type in manually throughout this process. So what you'll see is the machine reboot several times throughout this process, which is completely normal, as it goes through the Windows out-of-box experience. So you'll, again, see some of those classic Microsoft prompts, but once again, there's nothing that you need to do. You'll just kind of watch it as it goes through. Once it gets to the Windows sign-in page here, that's how you know the process has completed. So once it's here, it's completely done, and you are ready to sign in and use the machine. If you included any of the application packs as part of this process, it would kick those off silently right here as well. So it would install our client software, and then it would begin that process of running your applications or your scripts behind the scenes right there. So we head back to the computer management here. There's another kind of funny little example I have for you here. So let's say that somebody pops up and says, hey, I have a need for a new piece of software right away. Maybe they didn't install what they needed to, or they changed rules, or whatever the circumstance might be, they need the software and need it right now. So what you can do is you can help out this person by finding their machine in the list, clicking deploy applications on the right side there, and then you can select the application pack that you want. Now in this case, we'll just do Visio, but you could have multiple running in concert. So you could do Visio and Chrome and Teams back to back if you wanted. Now in this case, we'll go ahead and fire this off, and we can look back at the machine. Now, in this case, there is a pop-up box. Now, this is an optional component that you can choose to add to your deployments. And if you do this, it'll do exactly what you're seeing here. It'll pop up and allow people to defer this up to an hour. So if someone's in the middle of something, or they just can't do it right now, this gives them up to an hour. But after that hour, it will begin, and the software process will begin installation. Once again, completely silently behind the scenes, so there's nothing they need to do. Now, we talked about the image, we talked about applications. So the other side of the coin here would be for platform packs. So we provide these to you, these platform packs. There's nearly 1,700 of them already made. They're make, model, and OS specific. And they really paired up with that hardware-independent image that you would have created earlier. And that's a really big part of what Smart Deploy is this flexibility in the various components that we have. So here are all the platform packs that we have downloaded to the machine. You can see one of those has a little icon telling us that it can be updated. So what we can do from here is we can go and search for another platform pack if we wanted to. Again, any number of those ones that already exist. We can go ahead and download it right to our machine, and that process will kick off quickly as well. Now, if I want to go to that machine that we already have, it's really easy. You just right-click, say update, and it will update that platform pack to the latest version right here on the machine as well. And you can see that indication of that process happening. Now, if I head back to all computers, you can see that there's now a pop-up on the left side here. And the reason for that is because now we have a newer version of the platform pack, and that machine is telling us, hey, we have a newer driver pack available. Do you want to go ahead and install those drivers? In this case, we definitely do. So I'll select that machine and hit update drivers, select the pack that I want, and go ahead and kick this off. You may notice that option in the middle there. Smart Deploy does include BIOS flash utilities as part of the update process. So it's a popular one we have, and it'll do the BIOS flash along with the other drivers to make sure the machine is fully up to date and secure. And that little cube there tells you that just like the other two, this process is also kicked off and has started. Now, if you have a particular group of people, like say a sales team, you can select that group that you can create out of this list here, and then you can pull up those particular machines. Now, for this example, we'll say that you have somebody that you need to back up their user data. Perhaps you're planning to move them to a newer version of Windows, or you want to manually back them up for other reasons. You can do that right through this interface here. So select the machine, select the capture user state option, and then once again, you can decide if you're going to do a local capture or a cloud capture. So again, if you had somebody at their house, you can still back up their data as well. Now, what you can do is you can select between the user settings, the app settings, and or the documents, and that will allow you to back up that information, and it gets saved to the cloud. So it uses the USMT, the scan state function, to make sure all that data is successfully saved and backed up. So if I kick this off, you'll see that once again, a little clock pops up and says, hey, this is about to get started. And then momentarily, it will switch over to this picture for the person, letting you know that the user state migration process has begun. And then once it disappears, you know that data has been fully backed up. Now, in this particular case, now that we have the user data backed up, we can go through and deploy another image to this person. Now, this will look very similar to the first example I provided. We went through that process. But here we can deploy Windows 11 to a new user. So let's say that that person is working from home and you want to update them to the newer version of Windows 11, which I'm sure is going to be a big part of many operations here in the coming months. So you can select that version of Windows and go ahead and kick off that deployment. Now, Windows 11 is going to be a look and feel very similar from a Smart Deploy perspective. You can create a new VM with Windows 11, configure it again just the way that you need to. So really, it'll just drop into the existing Smart Deploy architecture real easy. The only thing you'll do differently is create a different version of Windows when you create the VM, and everything else will be ready to go, and you can just kind of keep going with your normal process of Smart Deploy here. So once you have done that, let's say in our example that the machine has fully been deployed, you now have Windows 11 sitting on there, and you want to put the user data back. Well, what you can do is select the machine, bring up the user data migration option, and you can then select a cloud provider to pull all that user data and drop it back on the machine. So this allows you to be more granular with how you do this. And there's another feature of this that's kind of cool too. You can actually do this as a one-shot as well between machines. If you have two machines, you can select one and the other, and it'll migrate the user data between them automatically. So once again, the icon will let you know that this process has kicked off, and the user data will then be pulled down from the cloud and applied to that machine. And once it's disappeared, you'll know that the user data has been done. So that is about it for the quick overview of those different scenarios that we talked about here today. So as a quick recap, you can do full image deployment to a remote machine, you can do application to a remote machine, or you can do driver update to any of those remote machines or in the office. And again, if somebody moves from one location to the other, say from the office to back to home, you can still continue to deploy all the things you need to regardless of where they physically sit. So if you do the full image deployment, you will actually do all those at once as well. So full image deploy along with apps and drivers, or like I said, you can break them out into their component pieces as needed. From here, my recommendation would be to go to our website, get started with a trial. We offer a 15-day fully functional trial to 15 machines, and that'll allow you to really get a sense of the product and play around with it. Again, you can have all the features available to you. You can get a sense of if it really fits into what you're looking for. Myself and my team here are always at your disposal throughout the pre-sales process, along with sales and post-sale too. So what that means is if you have any questions along the way, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we can provide you a one-on-one demo and provide you with any kind of assistance as you need to get that process started up. We also offer a Wednesday demo that's kind of a group format. So if you're looking for just a little more information about how the process goes, a little more technical detail, I'd recommend looking into that as well. So once again, thank you for spending the time to learn a little bit more about Smart Deploy here as well, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Austin, and thank you for being with us live. We have a number of questions that have come in. Guys, get your questions in for Austin. And I'm not surprised we have so many. I know the first time I saw Smart Deploy too, and I've seen it now a couple of times. I always want to get my hands on it. I want to play around with it. I'm a fan. And I know that people always have, they want to definitely try it out. So let's go ahead and jump in here. Let's start with this one. There's a lot to choose from here. Actually, let's start here. Is the cloud deployment feature available on the free trial?
It is, actually. So the free trial is a 15-day trial, has all of our features as part of it. So once you're in that trial process, you can use any of the features that we have. All of the cloud options are included into that. And, of course, we're here to help you along the way. So if you have machines that are at home or a remote office or anything like that, you can go ahead and install the client on it and give it a shot.
Okay, when it comes to cloud deployment, can I manage or re-image a computer that's not connected to the network? Good question.
Yeah, exactly. You certainly can. So if you're on the same local network, you'll just use the host name to communicate back and forth. But if you are on a remote network, we have a feature called Cloud Broker, which is powered by Azure, that allows those communications to go through. So if you're at a coffee shop, if you're at a city halfway around the world, or anything in between, the client will still communicate back with the console and still allow you to do any of the features that you have through the console, whether that be an image deploy, app deploy, driver deploy, or capture and deployment of the user state. All of that can be done really on any network.
We have, this question. Is there a limit to the number of platform packs we can download from the Smart Deploy library?
Nope, there's no limit at all. As a customer, you have access to all the ones that we have. Last time I went through there and checked, we had over 1,600 packs available. So if you have HP, Lenovo, Dell, Microsoft machines, there's going to be a whole bunch of packs at your disposal that are updated on a regular basis. And yeah, you're welcome to download as many as you'd like. So if you have a very diverse environment, feel free to download a whole bunch of them, and we'll have that support for you.
A question that's come in. Does Smart Deploy also handle the licenses for Windows, etc.?
So if you have a volume license contract with Microsoft, Smart Deploy has features that allow you to integrate that with our product. And more specifically, you can associate it with an image. If you want to do permanently as part of, say, your sales team image, you can make it in there. Or you can put it into an answer file as well, which would give you a little more of a granular option to decide when that's applied. But in either case, we pass it over to SysPrep, and so when the machine is deployed, it will put that Windows licensing in there and make sure the machine is activated.
There's another one that's coming. Is it possible to do a self-service? Is it possible to do self-service application deploys? Is it a corporate store quote unquote. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So the way that the application packs kind of work is that there's a pool of them that we provide to you that are kind of common apps, and then you can make your own as well. So anything that you can run silently or run via command line, which is it could be executables, MSIs, VB scripts, all the standard type of operations. You can create packs out of those and have a library on the console side. So at this time, the way that would work is your end users would request an app, through normal communication channels to you, and then you would be able to push it out. Or conversely, you could just simply say, hey, everybody needs 7-zip, and you can push it out to everybody. So yeah, there's a library of apps that you can download or curate yourself and push them out to your users that way.
Okay, one last question. We currently have at least 10 different models across both HP and Lenovo. What's the best way to deploy a Windows image across multiple computer models?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the cool features of Smart Deploy is really how this works. So when you deploy, each individual machine will query the hardware to determine what make and model that actually is. So for instance, if you had 10 or even 20 or 30 different models, you could select them all at the exact same time in the console and say deploy. The beginning process would start, and on each of those different machines, we would programmatically determine what that machine is and then download and apply the correct drivers and platform packs to each of those machines. So yeah, it's really easy to select, and we kind of do it for you.
Great. And a quick reminder, one last time, getting their hands on that free file, where do they go?
Yeah, so just head to smartdeploy.com, and there's a download tab on the right-hand side. Just go ahead and hit that. You can just sign up really easy. Ask for your name and your email type situation, and as soon as you do that, it'll present you with a big page with a nice yellow button in the middle that you can download it. And you can download it on, if you or your colleagues want to try it, you can certainly do that at the same time. So we're based on the number of endpoints you have. So if you have any questions for that, please let me know. Again, my name is Austin, and I'm happy to help you throughout that process.
Austin, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it. We do have a few more questions. We're going to get those over to you. And again, guys, any more questions you guys have for Austin, go ahead, get them in the system. We'll get them over to him. So thank you, Austin. We appreciate it.
Great. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. And I'm thrilled right now then to announce today's final speaker. It's Jamie Beck, Senior Principal Product Marketing Manager at Red Hat. Jamie, take it away.
Hello, this is Jamie Beck with Red Hat, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Ansible Security Automation with an introduction to Ansible Security Automation for security teams. So what will we go over today? So first off, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what is the Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform. You've probably heard a lot about Ansible out there when you're thinking about automation, and so I'm going to talk to you a little about some of the benefits of utilizing the Ansible Automation Platform, and then we'll jump into security automation and how you can use that within your security organization. We'll then go through some next steps and some resources that we can use, and we'll also watch a fun, quick video at the end, so stay tuned for that. So why would you want to be using the Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform? Essentially, when someone runs into a task that they never really want to do again, that's a great place to start when you're thinking about utilizing the Ansible Automation Platform. So it allows you to automate tasks that some people may think are mundane, and it allows you to do things that you don't want to do over and over again. And so Ansible really allows you to automate a lot of those things. And we'll talk sort of about it in general to start off with, and then we'll dive into the security automation use case. So one of the things that Ansible Automation Platform can help you do is to automate across your organization. So a lot of times we'll hear from our customers and partners about how their teams are using Ansible to actually connect things across their organizations. So you might be doing network automation, but not security automation. You may be automating dev tools, but you're not automating network. And one of the things that the Ansible Automation Platform allows you to do is automate different things across those organizations, and also share tools within the Ansible Automation Platform that allow you to connect those teams and allow you to share that information across all of your different organizations utilizing the Ansible Automation Platform. And so when we think about why would you want to be using Ansible, first off, it's well known in the industry as a very powerful tool that you can use at enterprise scale. So many people are automating tens of thousands of nodes within their company, and they're automating, as I mentioned on the last slide, a lot of different processes and things across a lot of different organizational teams. It's also a simple automation language. So a lot of people that don't have a ton of programming experience can learn the YAML language. And that's one of the things that's very attractive to people about utilizing Ansible. I'll also talk a little bit about some of the content that we've pre-created for you that you can use that also is very easy to plug into Ansible Automation Platform as well. And then it's also agentless, so we can integrate within a lot of hybrid and hybrid cloud environments. So what's in it? I'm not going to go through every single one of these things. You can dig into Ansible on ansible.com at your leisure, but some of the big things that we're talking about right now is automation controller. So that's your control plane for Ansible. Execution environments are really where we're looking at the execution plane for Ansible. And then jumping down to content collections, we've got a number of different certified content collections with a bunch of different vendors that we work with that you can then connect across a number of these. And I'll dive into that a little bit, how that works with security in a moment. We also have the services catalog, which allows you to spin up and spin down automation. So that's more of a management tool that you can use within the platform. And so it really makes delivery of automation within your organization easier. And it's also a neat way to connect teams together as well, using services catalog to look at how you're automating things. And if we think more about the analytics within the platform, that's when we jump down to the lower right-hand corner here and we talk about Red Hat Insights for Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform. If you're familiar with Red Hat, you also know that we have Insights for OpenShift and Insights for Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So now you've got that across the Ansible Automation Platform as well. So that gives you a lot more insight into what's going on within the platform, what you're automating, and shows you different ways that you can save time and save resource by using the Ansible Automation Platform to automate different things within your organization. Another thing that it does is it allows us to look at various different technologies across the company, and you can automate on the edge, you can automate up in the cloud, you can automate at data center. So it really, again, allows you to go across various different teams and automate across many different areas of your company. So I know that breakdown silos probably gets used too much in the tech world, but it really does, Ansible really does allow you to break down silos and kind of have all your different teams on the single unified platform. So now let's jump into what is Ansible Security Automation. So it's our deeper expansion into the use case to provide more things for security teams to automate across identification, search, and response to security events. And when you look at how we're automating security, it's really giving you higher visibility by automating different things that may have been in the past, things that needed to be done randomly, things that might have needed to be security checks that were needed to be done by the individual over and over again. This allows you to automate a lot of those things. So one of the things that we say when we're talking about what Ansible Security Automation allows you to do is it also allows you to cut down many times on human error, because if a person is doing the same task over and over and over again, that can be tedious and mistakes can be made. Ansible allows you to aggregate some of that and automate some of those processes so that those things may be easier to do. And then when you look at what is in security automation, we have a supported set of Ansible modules, roles, and playbooks, which allows to help you to respond to cyber attacks and things that may be anomalous on your network. So what do we cover in general? So we've got endpoint protection, which is the newest thing that we cover with Ansible Security Automation. Endpoint protection was launched earlier in 2021. We have privileged access management. We have SIEM. We have intrusion detection. And we also can automate on enterprise firewalls. So those are some of the things that Ansible Security Automation can help you automate. And we've got a lot of different partners in the space that also like to work with Ansible to automate these as well. So is Ansible a security solution? So that's one thing that we want to be careful when we're talking to people about Ansible, is we're not really pitching Ansible as a security solution. Ansible is more of a way to kind of stitch together your different security solutions and tools already in your environment to more effectively have a cyber defense. So again, we have a lot of different vendors that we work with. We have a lot of different collections that we put together and integrations that we've done with security vendors. And Ansible can really help you as you have a bunch of different security tools that we now have to run across our network. Ansible can really help you to connect those things and look at them holistically within the platform when you're looking at analytics on how all your different tools are running through the Ansible automation platform. And so another thing, a way to look at it is what does Ansible Security Automation do? So you can look at investigation enrichment. So when you're looking at log configurations, destination verbosity, basically investigating what's going on across your security organization. It also allows you to automate threat hunting. So those alerts that may come through based off of various different platforms that you're doing threat hunting on. And then how are we responding to those incidents? So oftentimes we'll have different vendors that we're using for threat hunting and incident response. Ansible can help you to automate across both of those, or all three of these use cases. So really interesting things that Ansible can help you do through security automation. So I mentioned all the different vendors that we work with. So we've got all of these different vendors across the different places. I mentioned all these different technologies a couple of slides ago, but this is just digging deeper into the ones that we work with. We see some pretty big players in there. We've got Cisco, we've got Checkpoint, Symantec, IBM, of course. And these are the ways that we can take the security ecosystem. And again, as you've got many different tools that you need to use across your environment, we allow you to automate across those tools. And again, using some of the analytics within Ansible, you can see what's going on across all these different things in real time. And we actually have over 100 certified content collections, which is very exciting. The first one we have listed is Red Hat. So part of the collections that are automated on Ansible are other Red Hat technologies. We also have numerous cloud integrations. We've got network collections, and we've got these security collections that we talked about as well. So this is pre-built content that someone who is an Ansible automation platform customer can go out, get off of Automation Hub, and then they can get up and running with their automation right away. And the nice thing about content collections is these are supported by both Red Hat and by our security partners, or by our partners across these other technologies as well. So something that a lot of customers ask us about is, well, what about the stuff that's open source? So the open source collections will work, but they're not supported by Red Hat support, and they're not supported by the partners. So that's kind of a differentiator between what's in the platform. So what's in Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform and Automation Hub is your certified collections. And then the stuff that's out on Galaxy, which is open source, as the open source version of Ansible, that's the stuff that would be more experimental, that you would not really want to run in a production environment. These content collections that we're talking about in this slide are the ones that are supported by Red Hat and supported by our technology partners. So this is a quick presentation. Just wanted to go into some next steps. So there's a number of things hyperlinked here. We've got a free course that people can consume. It takes about an hour, if I remember correctly. We've got a security automation overview. We've got an ebook that's available to you. We've got a very intent blog. So there's a lot of different things on the blog that you can take a look at. And then, of course, we've got the ability to download a free trial. So that is here on the right side of the page. I encourage you to go out to this hyperlink and download the free trial if you aren't already an Ansible customer. And we think you'll be really pleased with what you find out by downloading this trial that you can have for 60 days. So some of the questions that commonly come over to the Ansible team are, where can I go to get started with the Ansible automation platform? Well, this hyperlink here is our Ansible Get Started resource. There's a nice video sort of about how to think about your first days as an Ansible customer, and also some of the different features that you get within the Ansible platform that we went over a few slides ago. And then, as I just mentioned, we also have the free trial. So that's another place to get started with Ansible. So that's a good place to go to get started. And then if you're looking for security integrations that we talked about here, there is the ability to go to ansible.com, and then up under the overview section on the front page of ansible.com, you can go to look at all the different security integrations, and each one of them actually has its own page and its own links out to go and look at the content that exists for these Red Hat and partner supported integrations. So please do check that out. And then where do we go next? We've got a bunch of different things available to you here around some different workshops, documentation. We've got numerous YouTube videos that you can check out, one of which we're going to go through on the next slide. And we can also look at, down at the bottom there, our Red Hat services. So if you need help getting up and running with Ansible, you can certainly talk to our friends in Red Hat Consulting, Red Hat Training, and those are some resources that are available if you'd like some help with Red Hat on deploying your Ansible automation platform subscription.
Great presentation from Jamie. And personally, Jamie couldn't be with us live for questions. So guys, but if you go ahead and put your questions in the console, we're going to go ahead and get them over to him. So just go ahead, put your questions in, we'll get them over to him. Don't forget to try out those free trials and the other resources he pointed out. Also, remember, you'll be getting a full replay of this. You're going to get all those, and you have all those resources to download. So make sure that you go ahead and download those resources. Thanks for sticking with us today. Now I have the honor to be announcing the winner of the Surface Pro 8. And our Surface Pro 8 winner today is Tamika Holloway. Tamika, you're the winner. So please watch your email. Myself or McKenna, probably myself, will be sending you an email and getting your address and phone number and shipping your prize out to you. So congratulations. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. We really, really appreciate it. As always, please take that survey. Let us know what you think. Thank you so much again to our sponsors at Call Tower, Okta, Smart Deploy, and Red Hat for sponsoring the community, for letting us bring the summit to you today for free. And again, please let us know what you think when you take that survey so we can bring you more great summits like this. Have a wonderful day, guys.